on the second page. Okay, there's this ULURP timeline. Does everybody have a copy of this?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. That's Teresa had suggested that we add to this Charter Revision Commission statement. And I honestly think this is something that is really important, that should go out to our community board members. But I don't know if it gets attached necessarily to the statement that goes to the Charter Revision Commission, because they already know that, right?
Are we gonna start?
And then I had.
Well, I'm waiting, oh, it's recording already?
No, I don't think so.
The screen is dark, so.
Khalid, are we live?
It's live. It says live.
Okay.
Oh, I don't need to get on the screen.
All right, so, and then.
Do we have quorum?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry,
And then finally, there was this spreadsheet that I sent out by email, which I didn't print, because spreadsheets are a massive pain in the neck to print. But did everybody see that?
No.
No, okay, so I'll bring it up on the computer, just so
Does
you.
that have to do with
He
what we're
didn't
sending
say-
to you?
No?
Yes, because
Yeah, I borrowed your pen,
Max
Teresa.
had that
Thank you.
we add some language surrounding how many affordable units we did versus
No, there's
other.
too much detail for this. They don't care about all
Let me
that.
finish.
Okay, go
Let me just finish. Versus how many affordable units other districts had done. And so I did actually manage to download a database from HPD
Okay.
that has all of the affordable
Max
units
or,
that were
Josh.
built or preserved since 2014 in every community district across the city. So I have the totals for our district and have the totals by district for every other
There's
community
estimate.
district. Because what Max had been referring to were the totals by council district, but if we are going to put in any language related to that, I think we have to keep it consistent by community district. So I did that, and just so you guys know, our total since 2014, which includes some buildings that are underway but not fully finished yet, is 1,900 units. And I did a sort of all of 1,900 units built, and another, I think, like 400 or 500 preserved. And looking at the list of other districts, I would say the bottom 10 districts have built and preserved fewer than 500 units each.
Sorry,
yeah.
these are affordable units?
Yes.
Oh, okay, just to be clear.
And it includes, and the spreadsheet, if you guys care to take a look at it, it's actually broken down amongst extremely low income, very low income, middle and moderate, and the number of bedrooms.
What time did
So
you
it
send
is,
What time did
I
you
sent that out on
Yesterday.
Sunday, I
Yeah.
think. So that, so it is interesting if you guys want to take a look at it. And basically, I mean, in terms of like trying to say who's done their fair share or not done their fair share, basically the bottom 10 districts is a bunch of districts that also just didn't build any housing at all. And a couple of districts in Manhattan that probably built a fair amount of housing but didn't build a lot of affordable housing. And if this is something that you guys want to include in the document, we can talk more later about that. But the language that I put in didn't refer to specific districts because I don't feel it's necessarily a good idea to call out specific districts and just feel like that makes enemies. It's worth calling attention to the disparities and to the fact that we have done really a good amount, relatively speaking, but I'm not really for, trying to like punish or call out someone else. So that's the way I wrote it.
Can I comment now?
Yeah, so actually, I just want to say, like, so if we can just maybe, like, take a little bit of time for general comments. I know Esteban wasn't even here last time, so, and then we'll go through each of the specific changes.
Okay, because I had sent an
Yeah.
email with a few changes,
Okay.
but one
I
of the,
actually did not get them, and could we even print them?
I don't think so. I think this is your document, so I don't think it includes my
Okay,
changes.
when did you send it out? 'Cause-
I just sent it this,
I see
probably
it.
like 6 o'clock, 5 minutes.
Okay, yeah, we probably didn't
Yeah.
get
So
them.
the primary thing, two things. Charter revision, their documentation,
It's here?
Yeah.
Her comments?
Nicholas?
Where?
Where?
It's behind, we'll look at with Max's comments and your comments.
Oh, on the
Oh,
other
back
side
on
the
of
other
Max's
side.
comments, okay,
Okay.
okay. Good thing you told
So-
us.
okay, so basically,
Oh, here it is.
when I looked at the documentation, the charter revisions documents, I also reviewed a couple of the hearings. Everyone acknowledges the fact that there's a disparity. Several council people talked about the fact that there are about 12 districts that have borne the brunt of affordable and housing development in the city, and the fact that that's a problem that needs to be addressed. That was one of the reasons why some people were pushing for the council deference, removing council deference, because they felt that that was, and we know that there's some council people that block everything, but they're probably a minority and an extreme. Others have been, the ones that are truly representing their communities have done a pretty good job of negotiating. Were in the hearings talking about what they did for their communities as a result of council deference. People on the commission also referred to the fact that council deference is a practice as part of a legislative board, body. There's no law, there's no policy, there's nothing that we could really write to stop it. It's just what a
They
practice
just
that they
agree.
do or don't do.
They do, yeah, they agree
They
amongst
agree on
themselves.
that in
Right.
principle.
You scratch my
Basically.
back and I'll scratch yours sometime down the road.
Sometimes,
Yeah.
but the thing is, even Gail Brower, is it Gail?
Yeah.
She was, had a long list of comments, but then someone made reference to something going on in Brooklyn, and she was just like, I don't go to Brooklyn. I can tell you what's going on there. And I'm like, okay, you've been
Yeah.
head of the borough president for Manhattan. I know you've been a
Yeah,
council
council.
person for years,
Yeah.
and different commission and all
Yeah,
kinds of
yeah,
roles.
yeah. She's been around for
And
30
you have
years.
no problem saying that you know nothing about what goes on in the borough.
The largest by population borough in the city. Great.
So
Thank you for your
that just said
ignorance.
to me, yeah, we probably do need council deference because we have a lot of council people that have no clue what happens in our community. So all that to say that some of my comments, I know that,
Your comments actually didn't get fully, I only have one page of your comments, it says attached are my changes, and then there's, that's all we
The
have.
attachment
Oh,
is
okay.
in here.
so that he just printed the email. So what,
If they're extensive, can you ask him to print them?
yeah. What I did was, two changes. One, we're talking about fair, and I know you had a section where you spoke about fair share, but that was below talking about needing to have a comprehensive citywide and district level community plans. Several people, like in the hearing, they don't have the appetite for it. Citywide, they talked about the history, and citywide has never happened. It's just too complex of a city to think we'll be able to get a citywide comprehensive plan done anytime too soon. So I was thinking, let's take baby steps. The main thing everyone agrees on, and city council is proud of the fact that they passed the fair share framework, right? They've passed it, it's sitting on a shelf, and everybody knows that it needs to be built out. And several council people talked about the fact that the frame, we have the beginning, we need to go through and actually identify what would be the targets for the communities, put some teeth in, how do we penalize communities that don't want to play ball and don't want to do their fair share. So there's something that we can build upon. So that's what I said, let's focus on that. That was some of my language to say that's a start. And then I made instead of a 10-year relook, it should be 5. Things are happening and changing too fast to say that we can wait 10 years to do another assessment of what's happening and what the impact has been, and who's done their fair
Yeah, and that's a good point because within that 10-year period, all the council members will be new.
gone,
Yeah.
right. And
So they can only do 2
council
terms
people
and
even
4
said
years each.
5-year, like they're even talking about a 5-year
Yeah.
framework, 5-year targets. So let's use their language. Right, and one person, remember if it was in the hearing or if it was in the reading, I think it was in the hearing, they talked about the fact that with the term limits now, which really changed the dynamic.
Yeah.
Because now council people can approve a project, but
Go
then
by.
they're gone before
Yeah.
it's actually implemented.
Yeah.
And so they don't have to feel the wrath or the brunt or the benefits
Yep.
of what they've signed off on. So they're not gonna fight too hard. They're gonna take more of the, a lot of them will take the
Yeah.
easier route,
This is why I think that the property owner, neighboring property owner should have a say in the matter.
That I think is going, I think that's going to the other extreme. I think we need to balance it with focusing on the community boards, and they're trying to take us out of it. Focus on the community, because the community board and our say, whether it comes to the bike lanes or the housing, and I don't even know how much of a say we really have in terms of bike lanes, open streets, stuff like that.
Depends on who you are.
Right,
Apparently.
so that's what I think that we need to focus on, the community board say, and the community board should be representing both the tenants
Yeah.
and the homeowners. So that we get
You
to,
wanna be really fair about it, we're 80% of the district, so.
right, I know, when
There's
that's what
actually way
Max was
more of
like,
us,
well,
you know?
they're more, why is it that the homeowners would have so much say, what about the tenant? So,
The problem with community boards is
So-
that they don't represent, they're not representatives because they're appointed. You know, so they don't really
That's
represent.
true, because we didn't have anybody from
So
the
maybe-
Flatbush on the community
So
board
maybe
for a
we
really long
can,
time.
so maybe we can, so now that we've heard,
I think it's just
Nicola's
people.
changes, right, let me just note those.
Is that it?
Okay, so basically
Yeah,
you want
Nicola's
to eliminate the entire
Which
paragraph.
I think is, yeah, you,
Okay,
okay.
You got it already?
are you suggesting to eliminate the entire paragraph, saying that we support
Oh, you have
citywide
that.
district level comprehensive planning?
This is in the COLA edit?
I have everything.
Can you pull up my
Is this a new
version?
one?
We don't
This
have
is your version.
Yeah, it's in the attachment. You have
So
the-
this one we
you
just
have
got is the
access online?
Nicola version?
No, but electronic version, since you're pulling it up online.
The newer one?
It's attached to the email.
there'll be a few additional edits, who knows?
Oh, this is one we had, she needs to, that was in the email, see the email down on the bottom?
Yeah, I know. That's.
This doesn't have the
Yeah.
version, right?
So then we have it already, so this is.
That's the whereas, that's what he just gave us.
Yeah, no, we
Yeah,
don't need.
but
to-
then
no.
all the changes already there, that's all I'm saying,
Did
instead
you
of trying
do it
to.
over? Yeah. Oh, she did, she mentioned.
That's what I'm saying, so we have that already.
Right, but.
So at the bottom, it was saying, the one we got from Nicola's business, it says we support
Okay.
at the bottom.
All right, so this is
That's an
difficult,
easy
this
way.
is difficult because we don't know what the changes were.
Oh, yeah, because it doesn't have the red.
So, all right, so
I have the change
I'm
here.
gonna go to
So the first paragraph, therefore,
This
Community
is why
Board
we
9
should work
resolved
on
that we
it,
support,
Gmail.
that's new, because that's talking about supporting the pre-certification process, which we didn't really talk about. So that's another community engagement
Okay.
that had been approved as part of the last cycle. Remember, they were supposed to get notification when an application started the pre-certification process so that we could start engaging with the developer. But what would happen is we got an email and nothing left. Developers never wanted to meet with us, at least our community.
Okay,
I would say that the process, of the 60 days or whatever it is, should start only after the developer gives us the plans. Once they give us the
okay,
plans.
can you
But
guys give
that's
me,
what-
can you
That's
give me a minute to
supposed.
just
Slow down.
add Nicholas changes so we can see what they are?
Yeah, this one.
I can't-
Otherwise, the-
why
the
can't
vote-
I
you will-
insert
Right,
it?
so
So
it's
why
two-
can't you
two
just
weeks.
pull up the other
Yeah.
version, because then you would
Here it
have
is,
it
and you
all
had to vote
in
for
there.
it.
Because there are two versions here, and right now we're just trying to see what everyone's proposals are so that we can vote.
What you said, I just printed.
Okay, so right, so I'm gonna note your changes in the main version in red, and then we're gonna go through the whole thing again, so we can see.
But it's in track changes. What I sent is in track changes.
Yeah,
So you'd be able to see.
you
the
should be able to see
changes.
those, or turn that on.
It's in a different color, just because of the way it was probably printed out, not showing the track changes.
Right.
So it's a little cleaner.
Doesn't show who made the changes and what they are.
Right. But all of that's in
But
the.
you should be able to turn that on the screen.
you're changing everything that should change.
Yeah, just edit it.
Two-step.
I should have pulled out my.
So the 60-day time, that does start with, when they started, that's when it's been approved.
Right,
So it's out of certificate, it's certified
Right,
now.
I think
Right,
that's,
That's when the ULURP
right, but
clock
it's a
starts.
problem because the developer can wait 6 weeks before they actually give you the plans, and then you have 2 weeks to go over it. So I'm saying that what we should ask for is that the time period should be once the developer actually gives us the plan so that we can review it.
Or is that city
I think
planning?
technically it's out there in the
Was everybody,
the zoning application portal, but what happens is, we were asking for, there's a pre-certification period, that could last years, really.
Yeah.
And that's when all the deals are cut.
oh,
And so, and that came up at the last charter revision, that they know that's happening, the community board is completely in the dark, we don't even know that there's an application that's working its way through.
Okay, so
So
my-
it was that we would get notified and be able to participate a little in that process.
My only suggestion is that we think about what concrete steps you would take, right? Because that's the whole problem with this thing to begin with, that it's kind of a suggestion that they meet, that they play nice and meet with the community early. But if you want to make it mandatory or some
Make it a
other sort of
requirement.
concrete step, that's, how do you want to make this an improvement? How do you want to?
But it's consistency, because they are meeting with and engaging and having with other communities. They're just not doing it here.
Right, so basically you have to ask for it to be mandatory.
Isn't that what I said? If we're,
No, you just said steps to require more
more
consistency.
consistency and
are required.
engagement are
Just say,
required.
make it mandatory for them to meet with community boards prior to the certification process, right?
Acceptable application, they have to do that.
Mhm.
Okay, so how, can I just, and we can shorten it a great, we just say, therefore, Community Board 9 resolves that we support requiring developers to meet with the community prior to certification. Or like maybe at least, and the way they met with this, like 1 day prior to certification was so rude, like, let's say 2 weeks prior to certification.
Yeah.
What do you guys think?
Yeah.
I'm definitely down for it.
I would
We
like
have
to
to
see-
implement that, that has to.
2 weeks doesn't really do much for us anyway.
I think we should see
Then
that.
we want-
Because some communities were having multiple conversations and were part of that whole planning process.
Freedom, it's in their
And
website.
Kings Highway
Why not a certification? Why don't we get a
is
notification?
not formally submitted yet, that's the thing, it's pre-certified. Well,
As soon as they
Yeah.
send, whatever documentation they send, as soon as they send it, we should be notified, that's all.
Yeah, so rather than being pushed to the outside of the conversation, we should be, sort of be pushing our way into the conversation.
Okay,
I'll
so
say-
how about a requirement that developers meet with community boards within 30 days after filing an application with that's the, filing is the first step, right? There's pre-filing actually, isn't
Yeah,
there?
we want to get in, the first step
Yeah.
rather
You wanna get in
than
as
Yeah.
early as
10
possible.
steps
It
down the
sounds, it
path.
sounds ridiculous. all
Okay,
these
so
pre-
what-
I mean, it's really up to
What
our
is the- what's the
council person to
technical-
represent us.
What's the technical name for the very first step, right? Because there's the pre-filing period, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's no,
Which is kind of low.
First communication.
Just use the term preliminary.
The document itself is,
should we just say requirement that
they have
developers
to
meet
file,
with
they have to
community
pay for the
boards
filing?
during the
Because
pre-filing
remember,
period?
Empire's
Is
been
that,
out there for years before they actually paid for it and started the process.
yeah, I mean,
I think it's on receiving, like, they receive some kind of, number, like some kind of like, project number, right? Isn't that what it is? That you get some sort of like, that you get a project number? Like, once you've filed all of the required documents, the city gives you like a project number. I think that's what it is. I think that's actually like the first. I mean, we can just say that we support requiring, why can't I,
You're in the preview.
You're not in Word, you're.
okay, so I need to download this.
Open it up in Word or something.
Or just open it up.
Yeah, you should be able to open it.
That's what I'm doing.
There's a, in the middle, there's a file.
Yeah, like,
But now the track changes is off. This is
Enable
really-
editing.
enable editing. And go back to, review, go up to review.
You must file a job application in DOB now.
Markup.
That's
This
for
includes
building
drawing.
department. That's not
It's not city plan.
planning.
You might also just do.
Pre-development planning and preparation.
I think that they created the pre-certification in order to bypass.
Oh, there
the
we go.
community boards.
Thank you.
Most likely, yeah. So basically get it all
Okay,
approved, like, here it is.
so we support any charter revision,
And we like
so
talk
we
about like,
support
can you make that little
charter
tweak? Make that tweak over there.
revisions.
They're like,
Mhm.
Come on. Okay, do you have your version locked?
No, are you active? Do you have Microsoft? Or are you a Google
What's that
person?
activate up there?
This says unlicensed product.
Most
up
features
here.
are disabled because your Office product is inactive, so you have to activate it.
Yeah,
So you don't have.
Just go back
What,
to-
do you work in Word and Google?
Yeah,
just go back to Google and in
Just
the
open
middle,
it in a Google Drive.
yeah, open it up in Google. You see in the middle?
Yeah.
Open with,
In
the center.
middle, Go
Oh,
back.
go, yeah.
in the center of the previous screen, there's
Go
open.
back to
The
very
first
tab.
step for city planning is
Press
finding
the
the
middle.
pre-application
The middle.
statement.
See,
Yeah.
there's a drop down,
Does that sound right, Jen?
open with Google Docs. There you
yeah,
go.
there we go.
Pre-application statement. Is the first step.
okay, so,
Here you have your track change.
To notify city planning. Pre-application statement
No, no.
is the first step.
therefore, community board
This is
nine
fine,
resolves
that's
to
fine. Oh, no,
support
it's-
any charter revisions which strengthen requirements for community engagement during the pre-certification process, including mandatory meetings with community boards 30 days after filing a pre-application statement with the Department of City Planning and
It says it triggers the assignment of a DCP project manager who guides you through the process.
at least one, okay, how about this? And one or more meetings after filing an initial EAS and 30 days prior to certification.
Can you make that much bigger, please? The screen? There.
Does that help?
It's really small.
Oh, some people, yeah, that's better.
I could
Does
see
that
it.
help?
That's great.
Okay. Okay, so do we like this? Is anybody not good with this?
My only issue is that what happens if they create another category before the pre-certification in order to bypass the community board getting involved?
We can only do what we can do.
Yeah,
Right.
can't predict
To
everything.
ensure consistency, because the main thing is, some communities have great relationships with their developers. They're meeting with them all the time. Ours, not so much. Whether that's driven by a council person,
Yeah.
probably.
Or the board.
Yeah, I mean, like, really, like historically, don't have any reason to, because the council member's gonna do the opposite of what we tell them to do. So like,
And
So that's why they're just
Should be
meeting
bring-
directly with the
should be
council
including
person
us
and
in the
she's
process.
lying
for
That's
us.
right.
Yeah.
There should
Hector's
be a
running.
council person driving it.
You're running. I saw your name pop up on.
It's interesting.
Good luck to you.
Which council
It's a
people
long road.
have
Tough road.
And they were meeting
It
with
is.
Very uphill.
applicants, but they-
I had some questions in the next section, but I don't know if we're done.
okay, so Nicola, you have crossed out
Cause I moved it.
the, okay, where did you move it?
right below. Go where?
I think what's crossed out is immediately under that last and therefore. Right, that's not
Right,
it.
so that got crossed out, it doesn't look like it got moved.
It's
It's up at the top.
it's further up, right there.
Yep. Okay.
You should probably insert some spaces in between so you can,
Yeah, this is very hard.
right, there you go. So everything should just,
Okay, here we, yes, okay. Okay, fair enough.
This is where I added the language around the fair housing framework.
So, I just wanna make a comment about the 5-year versus 10-year thing and comprehensive planning versus the fair housing framework. So, the first point with comprehensive planning, and this is a suggestion that actually came from a lot of parties, including, I think, at least one of the borough presidents. It's not just about housing, it's also about, economic development needs, and I think in particular, there was one borough president who's very interested in manufacturing. It's about transportation needs and transportation networks, environmental considerations, et cetera, et cetera. So it is intended to be broader than just housing, and that's something that we've all talked about, is why is everything always just housing, right? We have other things that we need to consider as well. And so in that respect, I do support comprehensive planning. The city has in the past produced comprehensive plans. They're not very detailed. They're very, very, very high level. You know, they'll say things like, and our target for a number of housing units is X, and affordable housing units is X, right? And we want to prioritize, you know, these 2 industries, and we're very concerned about, you know, like climate change, and that's kind of it. That's the level of detail that the comprehensive plans go into, and that's not necessarily bad, right? But it does, if like a district like ours cares a lot about a certain, you know, whatever, like we care a lot about preserving commercial somewhere, or we care a lot about, you know, preserving healthcare somewhere or something like that, then we're gonna have to do a more detailed district level plan, right? And so that's the idea of comprehensive planning, is it's not just zoning and it's not just housing, right? The fair housing framework was to very specifically address you know, the issue of disparities in housing production. So the fair housing framework is for 5 years. The reason I think 10 years is a better framework is because in planning terms, that's usually the minimum time frame that you're looking at, because rezonings take a long time to do anything. There are tons of rezonings where nothing happens for like 10 years. We've seen that too, right? So like, would you want to, and like what happened, you know, if you get impatient, like what happened with East Harlem, they rezoned it, nothing much happened. And then they rezoned it again, they upzoned it again. And to me, that seemed like extremely unfair, right? And the same thing, you know, potentially could happen in a place like Sunset Park. Yeah, they upzoned an entire freaking avenue, and this was the one I think Tom and Gotti sued over, like full of occupied homes and apartment buildings. Okay, nothing much has really happened for whatever reason. Are they now gonna upzone it again? You know, like, you can't, because it's been like 10 years and nothing has happened. I think like you kind of have to wait to see what's gonna happen. If they've made the effort, right? Okay, if they've done absolutely nothing and there's no capacity for development, that's one thing. But if they've done something and nothing has happened, like at least give it a
Right.
little runway.
But
So
when do you
that's
take
why-
another look? You don't wait 10 years to
Right.
look and see that they've
Right.
done nothing.
Right.
Things are moving very quickly now.
Yeah.
You can't hold a person in a job. The CEOs don't last more than 2 or 3 years now. And they're running major corporations. So to think a 10-year time frame, nobody's doing that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
All right, fair enough. I mean, you did say like taking into account the development pipeline, so I think that has to take into account if the zoning allows for future.
I took all your language,
Okay.
I just took out the word community plan, because that's a trigger, like I'm looking at that, some people don't wanna hear because they think complex. They're happy with their framework, their zoning framework, we're saying build it out more. Now, building it out more may mean that we need to do a community plan for areas that have absolutely no idea. For an area like us, we're overdeveloped, we'll prove that we're overdeveloped. Do we need a detailed, comprehensive plan to prove that we're overdeveloped?
Well, but I'm just saying, like, even at the city level, I mean, I think comprehensive as opposed to just zoning without planning is something that we should support. I don't think I would support, like, the city dictating to everyone exactly what to do, but, right, to have.
And I think that's in coordination with the community boards.
So do you wanna say,
5-year housing and locally unwanted land use targets developed in coordination with the community boards. Targets
right, but what I'm saying is, as opposed to housing only, I think we should be looking at a broader set of factors, including economic development, you know, community facilities, parks, healthcare, da-da-da-da-da, right?
Who's gonna be looking at that?
Transportation.
Baby steps. You're trying to solve world hunger. We can't even get a housing target, and we're being targeted for rezoning.
And I think
That's a
what-
fire that we're
No,
trying
but
to
and
put
I
out
think,
right now.
and I think one of the reasons, right, that there's so much opposition and that you know, the plans are so unreasonable, is it's not taking anything else into consideration, right? I mean, like you guys have always said, you wanna maintain the commercial on Empire. But if commercial cannot ever be, if that's not part of the discussion, if the only discussion is housing or not housing, right?
But that's not gonna, I'm saying, start with the fair
That's-
housing
yeah.
framework and build it out. Build it out can mean a number of things. How far in planning do you wanna go? We're gonna, and I mentioned that we need to look at, when you get further down, I left all of that language in about providing resources so people can create their comprehensive plans. We need to look at the environmental impacts. It's just a language thing. It's, they like their framework and they know they need to build on it. So let's leverage the fact that they know they need to build on this.
Right.
One thing, to Suki's point, is that if we don't currently trust the process, the last thing we wanna do is give the city more frequent ability to change our
There is
zoning.
no process now.
Well, you're
It's
saying
whenever
that
they
they're gonna
want.
do it-
There
If they do it every
will
5
be.
years.
There's fair share, there's no process now. They need to build it out.
Well, there will be a framework because they passed that law. The only
They passed it multiple times and it sat on a shelf and they all admitted that. There's no teeth to it to actually make anything happen. There are no targets. This was the second time that they did a framework.
So
The
it's
first one
just
was like in
fair share,
1989
but
or
there's
something like
nothing,
that, and
there's
it
nothing,
sat on a shelf.
Right. So
there's
the
no
other-
consequences or format.
Right, so the other point that I wanted to make though is who's in charge of setting these targets? And it's HPD, which is a mayoral agency. And we could imagine, so we could all imagine situations where that's great for us and where that's horrible for us. And at this point in time, like, we have no idea where we're gonna end up.
I would argue that HPD is a city agency. The commissioners of all city agencies are appointed by the mayor, all big ones anyway, so, you know, not the same boogeyman as it sounds as saying that that's a mayoral agency. It's not like a
Right.
distinct commission that was organized by a specific mayor. It is a city agency in the city charter, sort of with a charge itself.
I mean, I'm not saying that, you know, everyone who works there necessarily has the same opinions or that they're all against us or something like that. But if the mayor has a really strong view, he makes them do what he wants.
Yes.
I think we've all seen that.
Yes.
Like,
They may
not
come
not
up with a
telling-
number,
Like
but
not
then,
telling us how many rent stabilized buildings there were in Soho, for example, when they were right there. Like HPD has all that information, they can share it, but they don't want to. So,
The
I
mayor
mean-
can fire them.
But, okay,
Listen to the
so
mayor.
I think that's one really, really important point to keep in mind is that, you know, we can try to influence what these targets are, but we may ultimately not like them. nothing's guaranteed.
Sure.
And as they flesh out that process, we'll have some input
Mhm.
and feedback on what we like or we don't like and we don't think is fair. I can't see them giving us a higher target than we've already developed right now, while other areas have absolutely nothing.
I mean, that's fine, you know, if the city wants to do a comprehensive plan, they're gonna do it, but I agree with you that the important point is a district level comprehensive plan.
And we need language that, remember, this is going to a ballot. If some of these changes we wanted to take place, it's going to the general public to approve. So it has to be in language simple enough that they'll be able to understand.
Does anyone else have any comments up to this point?
I think I mentioned last time that if you want to put teeth into it, you can put a stipulation that any community that has already done 20% of their fair share, they should not have to be required or to do anything more until other communities do their 20%. And then stack it like that.
This is something that ANHD was pushing for with the governor's housing compact whenever they were talking about doing equitable development.
Mm-hmm.
And the opposition was like, you can't start, we're not all starting from the same place. So you have to have some sort of look back period, you have to have some sort of like evening out period to where those people are gonna catch up to what is happening right now. You don't just start now and say, okay, now it's gonna be equitable. That doesn't work.
So, like, give me an example of exactly how this would work. So, like, for example, you know, we have a situation where, let's say Williams, for argument's sake, has done 20,000 units of housing and maybe like, you know, 7,000 units of built and preserved affordable housing. Like, what does that mean for everyone else? And we're at, you know, 2,000 units of housing that we've built and, you know, 500 that we've preserved. What does this mean for
There's
us?
a lot of different formulas you could
Metrics,
use.
yeah.
I mean, I think there's like, you're weighing like a number of units, which is actually not the greatest way to calculate density in an area. Like, so there's like a lot of moving parts. You could have like a certain number of units based on, you know, person per square inch or whatever, however you want to like have, you know, so that there's actual like, again, like we're already one of the densest neighborhoods, right? So like anything on top of where that existing density, they're never going to catch up to that. So like it's got to be, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I'll have to look to see what formula they were. ANHD was. That's Association for Neighborhood and Housing Development.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what they were advocating for there, but I know that it was like specifically the formula would essentially ease the current burden that neighborhoods like ours are feeling, and give us a break and call on, you know, on the Upper West Side and the Upper East Side and Park Slope and, you know, all those other neighborhoods to do their work.
So this sounds like something that would ultimately be worked out by HPD, right? I mean, we can try to influence the process,
Yeah.
but it isn't going to be addressed in the charter. What's
Right.
directly? What's going to be addressed in the charter is what happens if somebody doesn't meet their fair, or not. We could choose not to address it, right? But you know, the proposals are for what happens if somebody doesn't meet their fair share. And if we're specifically talking about fair share as in the fair housing framework, right? Is that what other groups are talking about as well when they talk about fair share?
It's housing,
Because
it's
there's-
unwanted land use, it's, you know, shelters, methadone
So
clinics.
the other part of the other fair share, the locally unwanted land uses, is already in the charter, but it's an informational requirement. It's not like a hard thing, like everybody's entitled to do no more than their fair share type of deal, right? So, and then like the right to sort of, like, unless we specifically reference fair housing framework in the charter, there's not like a recognized right in the charter, you know. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I'm inclined to sort of focus on the enforcement, on the proposed enforcement that is like changing the ULURP process, because it's like all these formulas, while I agree and I think that we should be discussing it, is ultimately gonna be determined by HPD, not by the charter process, right? Am
I
I,
don't know, I mean, several council people brought it up as part of this process.
so they wanna write that
They wanna
directly into
expand
the
on,
charter?
they wanna expand on, in order to bring the equity that everyone knows is needed, they're like, we need to build this out more. And they brought it up as part of, and now whether it goes into the charter, but they know that zoning alone is not the answer. They know that there are issues with the permitting process, there's so many loopholes and things that drag down the process. ULURP, many people said that 6 months, 6 to 7 months is not the issue. It's pre-certification and post-certification, post-approval, when you're waiting for permits from DOB, you're waiting for HPD funding. There are a number of things that drag out development.
And the final certificate of occupancy, it takes forever, a lot of times to get that. But.
I mean, the reason they don't want community board input is because of the optics of it. It's always bad for them. Like, it's always bad press. And like
Right.
that's like they want to just skip over that part.
Right.
It's easier for them.
Yeah.
Fly on the radar.
Okay, so let me
Yeah.
try to focus again. So. Okay, so I don't see them getting into like a I somewhat agree with you that if there is gonna be a formula, it needs to be like somewhat more nuanced, right? But I don't see them putting a complicated formula into the charter, right? Because the charter is sort of like a constitution document, and it's really focused on like the powers and the roles and the process of like different parts of government. It very rarely like, am I right about this? Like,
But if we put something in to say that there needs to be a mechanism to determine the fair share allotment of affordable housing requirements, of shelters and what is it? Locally unwanted land uses.
right.
Framework,
So-
high level, this is our goal, and then, let whoever fill out the details, but that is part of the direction and the strategy that we have as a
So
city.
maybe what we would wanna say is, that we support adding a fair share requirement to the charter that would require relevant city agencies to come up with enforceable targets.
How would they enforce it though?
I mean,
And then that goes to the issue of, right, what happens if, right, so,
I think, if you don't wanna have like a stacked, what do you call it, limits, maybe, put in language that there should be a moratorium on all, communities that have already met their, their fair share, points, and then the other, if the city wants to build out any more, housing or shelters and all that stuff, it has to be done in other communities.
I mean, that's essentially what it said. What they were.
I think that's a fair point. The only question is how do you define what is fair share, right?
And they were doing a 10-year look back period for like at least for the one that they were in response to that particular plan, which didn't pass anyway. But yeah, it's like that 10-year period. So whatever you've done in the past 10 years, basically is like everyone starts at a different starting point, and then then you can do that, right? And then you can do a moratorium as well. Like that's the easiest way to get to zero.
So I think
10 years is the,
I think that
You look
And so look back, it's fine.
Yeah.
But look back.
I think a charter document would probably, say something along the lines of general, like what you said, that rather than being sort of informational, like the fair share requirements are now, that we would want it to be, to have the relevant city agencies define, define an enforceable target, subject, in coordination with the community boards and subject to council approval. Because I don't really love the idea of having the agencies be the sole determinants. Okay, so support building upon and implementing fair housing framework passed by the council. Was it 2023 or 2021? I think it was 21.
23.
Okay.
Adrian Adams was, talking about, they may have had another version earlier, but it's 2023.
Resolves that we support charter reforms that recognize.
There's some language to the effect of what we've been talking about in the fair housing framework. So, a plan for housing growth guided by equity to ensure all communities fairly contribute to addressing the city's housing crisis. And so, we could sort of start there and then get more specific if we want to, but just tie it into the reference.
What did I just do? Oh no.
Just press back. Undo on the left side of the panel. Did you find the other one?
It's next
It's
to
the
the,
arrow next to menus.
right, there you go.
Relevant agencies to,
Also, just to include as a whereas, I think it was on the snapshot by PCP that they had put that this past year more units were developed or built since 1965, which would also be further evidence that the zoning and unit process is not a debilitating factor to the development timeline. And I can send that.
While she's writing that, may I ask, can I speak? Because I have my hand up.
Yeah,
and nobody
sure.
calls on me.
Sure.
So to your point, y'all are making it way more complex, especially y'all keep pointing out and repeating yourself. They already mentioned in the fair housing framework what y'all talking about. And I understand Susan can say it's informational, but y'all didn't already plan to make this an extensive, specific outline. It's just to indicate in the charter the changes we want to see. So it doesn't really concern how they're gonna enforce it, what is the language they're gonna use. The point is you want it to be there so it could be implemented actually instead of just us debating about it all the time. And then my last point I wanted to make about the complexification y'all are putting too much on when it comes to how to make it nuanced. The simplicity of it is if you didn't do your fair share, the neighborhoods y'all don't wanna call out didn't do anything, that would be an indication they have to provide most of that development, essentially, to where that removes it from you applying that development. So that's basic subtraction and addition, not even formulaic at that point. And I think we should leave it there because Suki eventually said it, there aren't the determining factor anyway for the language because the community has to be. It's not just property owners, it's not just tenants, it's not just the community board, but it has to be inclusive of all of the affected parties. Because you may feel a way about methadone clinics and locally unwanted uses or whatever the word is, but the point is there's people who depend on that service. So they're getting it here already at max capacitation, that's fine. The 20% will be figured out with the other one. The reason why they won't catch up with us being so dense is because that's what made it dense, the development. So now they will become dense, and like she just pointed out as well, a lot of development occurred since 1965, so that is not a debilitation to that process as far as a short time period. The reality, which I all mentioned, is they're most likely not gonna do it anyway. But the point is, if it's implemented in the charter for that to be a change, we have something to go off of to create more teeth and bite ourselves. Whether they enforce it or not, they may not, but we would be able to bite by using the charter.
But
Right,
because once we
so-
place it in there, it would be.
So that's a good point.
I don't know,
So,
did you get one of the?
Yes, I got it.
so that's a good point. So now we're getting to the issue of enforcement, which one proposal on the table is to shorten the ULURP process, is to do enforcement by shortening the ULURP process, and it's essentially removing council review for certain types of developments, like for 100% affordable housing developments, for developments on public land. Some people are saying smaller developments. It would essentially end the review with the City Planning Commission. Or for districts which haven't done their fair share, so if it's an affordable development in a district that hasn't done its fair share, it would essentially remove, some of the proposals are saying essentially remove council review. So that's one proposal for enforcement.
Okay, I guess enforcement for throwing it off. You mean like fast tracking the process for certain categories?
Right, but the way they're suggesting for fast tracking it, primarily, that has to do with council deference, is just not having the city council vote on it. So as long as the city planning commission approves it, it would be approved, right?
Can I just add some more detail
Yeah,
on
go
that
ahead,
proposal?
yeah.
So, if I'm understanding it correctly, I think the way it works is first there will be a comprehensive plan, right? There will be targets set. And if certain projects are deemed to sort of fit within the scope of what that comprehensive plan is, then those might be subject to a faster process. Some of the things that you're talking about, maybe not having council review.
Okay.
Very tricky.
So when you're saying a comprehensive plan, right, who is that created by and who is that passed by?
So we don't have that yet.
What's the,
We're doing the circle thing.
how long is the look back period on that plan?
Not my proposal. It's the proposal that was in the I'm just adding that additional
Right.
context.
So I
So we have
And
think,
that is not just a development would be, 100% affordable, therefore there's no process for it.
so I think what you're essentially saying, right, is if the quote-unquote comprehensive plan consists of the fair housing framework, like Nicola was saying, which is essentially gonna set out targets for every district,
And we're asking for that framework to take into account the past development that happened into the community.
fair
So,
enough.
assuming that was carried out, then
Fair
the
enough.
target here would be more stringent than
Fair
in an
enough.
area where
Okay,
they
fair enough.
haven't been developed.
And so then, let's just take for example, random district, in Queens that hasn't done any affordable units, okay? Their target is 2,000 units, and an affordable housing developer, a nonprofit affordable housing developer, manages to acquire 2 houses that are on, 10,000 square foot lots, because those exist out there, right? So now they have a 20,000 square foot lot, they wanna build, they wanna knock down those houses and they wanna put up a 12-story apartment building, with supportive housing. And the community is totally up in arms about this. And let's even say, in addition, because it's supportive housing and it has to be totally subsidized, it's costing the city $1,000 a square foot. I don't think this is a project that I would support as a community member, because I wouldn't want that done in my community. And I'm not sure that it's necessarily good for the city, because, we do have a history in the city of, agencies and mayors contracting with their friends and for extremely expensive projects, right? And if there's no check on that project, sometimes even with a check on that project, bad projects get approved, but do we need to have no check on that project? I don't think so, right? On the other hand, if we said, okay, this district hasn't done anything, let's do a district level plan to figure out what are the best places in those districts where we can actually build housing, maybe identify public land, maybe identify, vacant underutilized lots, whatever, maybe those districts prefer to do it near their one LIRR station, and that's where they wanna do it, okay? Right, so identify those areas where people are okay with it, and, you know, figure out based on the market economics of that district and whatever, how you're gonna get it done, because in some districts, land is very cheap, in other districts, you know, they're okay with more upzoning, right? And so let's work with them to see how it's gonna get done. If there's needs to be more infrastructure or something added, let's work with them to do that, right? And then now that we have this plan, now it's gonna go through ULURP, right? They're gonna get a chance to vote on it, just like we would. The council is gonna get a chance to vote on it, right? So now we come to the discussion of council member deference, and is it really a problem?
Just really quickly before we
Yeah.
get to councilmember deference, I think what you lifted up is this inherent contradiction or this inherent conflict to this whole charter revision thing, which is how can sort of citywide needs, which are the need for housing is unmistakable, be balanced with local priorities, right? And in an environment where certain projects are deemed so important to the city that they're like that would be going directly up against local priorities sometimes. The question is, where do you fall on the sort of set of issues that we're juggling, and which ones, you know, are more pressing or not?
Well, I don't think that it's one or the other, right? I think what I'm trying to suggest is there's a third way, that, yeah, they haven't done their fair share, we recognize that, but maybe instead of letting the developers decide what are the best sites to build and what's the best way to build, and not having any oversight of that particular project, maybe we should get the community together, get the professionals, you know, the Department of City Planning, the independent planners, whoever, and come up with a plan that allows for more development and more affordable housing in that district, right? And then let's see if we can get that passed. And could their council member try to block it in the council? Yeah. But I also think, you know, like I said in my email, how often have we actually tried to put these plans before the full council and seen if a vote could pass it? Because I think what happens most of the time is developers get scared off. They pull the plans, right? But what would happen if it's truly in the interest of the whole city, right? And this whole fair share housing framework has made it clear to everyone what everyone has done and not done, and what, you know, what the target is and why we need to do all of this, right? Then presumably all of the other council members are more aware, right? And if it's truly in the interest of the whole city. Oh, and one more thing, you know, we no longer have the community preference for affordable housing. So now, if people generally want affordable housing, they have to think about what's going on citywide. So, you know, why wouldn't they, like, have we tried under these new circumstances putting forward a proposal to the whole council to see if they would vote up or down? Because I don't think these proposals never make it to the full council.
Well, the
right?
New York Blood Bank, right? Blood Center?
Yeah.
That was one of the last ones.
And they overrode it.
Yeah,
They
they overrode
overrode him.
Yeah.
Right? But there's never been a case, as far as I know, where somebody attempted to bring a proposal before the council and they voted no on a development, right? Like, when was the last time they actually voted down a development?
I think the answer, Suki, is one, that third approach that you described, I think some would argue, is the status quo right now. That's the approach that we're under, and that has led to some proposals never even seeing the light of day in council because those members are not going for it, and others, like the council members that represent us, you know, being more amenable to these things. And so I understand the sort of like inherent power that's lost in exempting some projects from a ULURP process, especially for a community like ours. But those communities that have been able to say no over and over and over and over again are also exempt from being able to say no. And I think there's some possibility in that for more equity.
Well, okay,
No,
but what
well,
I'm trying
I
to,
think part of the issue is Just thinking about what I was hearing in these conversations, some are like, I don't know what goes on in Queens, I've never been there. I leave it up to you, Councilwoman Teresa, to let us know. But now, if we have a framework that has been laid out with targets, like, okay, we came up with a target.
And
The
you're
target
not
looked at,
meeting the
there's
target.
some communities that literally flood every time it rains. And on those City of Yes meetings, they were like, hey, we'd love to do affordable housing. We can't, because with the housing we have now, it floods, my basement floods every time it rains. You have to fix our infrastructure
Yeah.
before you look at building any housing here.
Yeah.
And it, okay, thank you, and it goes, puts on a shelf and no one does anything.
That's
Now
how
they need to start
Adrian
doing
Adams got
something about it.
her district exempt, right? It's because of the
Part of that,
Exactly.
yeah, but it does flood out
And
there.
I wouldn't say it's the status quo in that we've never had these explicit targets before.
Mhm.
What always tends to happen is there's a private negotiation between city planning and communities where they'll tell us, oh, you have to do X number of units. But meanwhile, on the other hand, they're saying like, oh, communities that don't have transit don't have to do anything, right? Or, you know, if you're a coastal community, you don't have to do anything, right? And so, like, it never, like, the inequities never really see the light of day.
Right, so now we're shining a light.
It's never in black and white. What does the city need to do, and how much has everyone done, or how much does everyone propose to do?
Well, it's also, we don't really have a housing crisis. We have an affordability crisis.
Right.
There's plenty of housing out there
Mhm.
if you're very wealthy.
Mhm.
But if you're not, you have the crisis. So that's what our crisis is. It's not straight up
And
housing.
then there's people that don't want to rent.
And then in terms of the city approaching communities to do rezonings, it's not based on, well, you didn't meet your affordable housing target. It's based on, we don't, I mean, I don't, you know, we've all
Developer
speculated.
bought a plot
I
of
think
land and
this
they
is
wanna
a-
build
Yeah, we've
so.
all speculated
This is
what
a
it is,
great
but,
theoretical
you know.
conversation.
Uh-huh.
Some drinks.
Let's look at what we know has happened, right? And when you look at where all of the development has been happening and where it hasn't been happening, to then look at a system that produced that, right? And say that there's no room for changing that, I think it
Well, but
will
we are-
guarantee that we'll
we-
be in the same position.
Well, but we are proposing that they would change it, right? Because if you're talking about like a Bay Ridge, that is like
Right, so if there
very
was a
likely gonna fall
100% development,
short.
if there was a 100% affordable development being proposed under a situation where we had a comprehensive plan and it fit within that comprehensive plan, citywide plan in Bay Ridge, though that Bay Ridge
Okay.
board and that council member would then not be able to just reject it out of right.
Okay, I think what you're proposing is planning by spot zoning, which is not necessarily gonna lead to good results for the community, right? But I mean, you could think of lots of examples where that development is actually really bad for the city, really bad for, you know, the district. And whereas what I'm proposing is, okay, they haven't met their target. The city is going to propose a rezoning plan for them that would help them to meet their target, right? Give them a chance to come up with their own plan, sure. But if they don't come up with an adequate plan, right, then the city is gonna do the plan for them and the rest of us are gonna vote on it.
So I think he's adding to your point then, because the point from what I understood, feel free to further help me get clarity, was it was to expedite or like you said, shorten the process to where they don't have to go through the council review. So in that instance, just put it in the language to where the community formulates that plan of what more accurately meets those targets for what areas they identify. And that way, when it does get to that point, it would be specific to what they already defined according to their community. That way it wouldn't just be the spot location like you're saying. I think that's the combination of what you're
Right,
saying.
but I think the problem is that what's being proposed is not a comprehensive plan. It's just a target, right? The fair housing framework is not gonna look at what are better places and worse places. It's just gonna say, this is the number we think you should do. I mean, they might be implicitly looking at the capacity, but we won't really know that,
So
right?
put the language in there for the communities to develop, like you said,
I
and
thought it wasn't.
It is in there. That's exactly what we're saying. And if they fail to do that, then we're gonna do it for you, right? Today, we're working under a system where the mayor says, where can I do a rezoning? East New York, Jerome Avenue, you know, like East Harlem, right? But for some reason, he never looks at Bay Ridge, right? For some reason, he never looks at, well, they have actually, they did go on as an Park Slope, right?
4th Avenue.
Right, for some
But
reason, he
that was
never
a,
looks
that was
at,
a sweetheart
for some
rezoning.
reason,
That
he
was,
never
listen,
looks
I don't
at.
wanna belabor this debate, I think we see where everyone is.
but you said it's already in here, so we can move on.
I think that the point that I was trying to speak towards is that there are gonna be circumstances, if we are to address the issue of some people developing and others doing nothing, there are gonna be circumstances where that local ULURP process for those communities will need to be curtailed. That's the point I was making. And that was in response to the original comment you made about the sort of enforcement being about exempting or having an expedited process for certain projects that meet certain criteria.
I mean, let me put it this way.
I'm not willing to give up input in my community here to try and see if we're gonna force the hand of Bay Ridge, because they'll find another way around. And then we'll be stuck.
Good one.
So.
Let's make sure we can use the power that we're trying to preserve here.
I'm in agreement with that. I
All
think
these
there are
City of
better.
Yes was supposed to be, citywide text amendments, and this is how we're gonna, and they all got carved out again. And who got the upzoning?
We did,
Yeah.
we did.
Giving
So,
more power,
I'm
And
not
we used to
willing
be exempt from City of Yes, didn't we?
giving more power to a
Reject it.
centralized government never works out in the end.
Yeah, I'm not,
No, so we'll have a 5-year, we'll implement, and in 5 years, we'll look back and see where people are, and then we'll come up with a new one.
All right, y'all.
They do
Bay
these
Ridge
try
is gonna be doing
revisions
that
every few
5-year
years.
too. I want y'all to know that.
What happened?
Bay Ridge will be doing that 5-year too, and they'll say, our comprehensive plan says we need 0. Everyone here can afford everything.
Right, that's a
But
good point, I see your
it's,
point.
Well,
I hear what you all are saying
well,
about relinquishing power
and
and,
they're only gonna get away with that if HPD, which as I have said is
They
a
let them.
mayoral agency, lets them get away
They
with
do
it,
it.
right? But at the end of the day, you know, the charter, this document is about the division of powers, and we don't wanna center it all in one place, cause we don't know, you know.
it's
who
not
might
about
control it.
centering it all in one place, it's about for certain projects that meet certain needs, that have certain benefits that we've identified as like
Who's
big
gonna-
needs
All right, so
Yeah,
what's
but
gonna happen?
who's gonna determine that?
Those
I understand
certain
that the position
projects
around the
are gonna be the
table,
ones that are in our communities, and the
Yeah,
projects for their
who's gonna
communities are
determine
as
gonna
it
get
has been
exempted
for
out.
the last 12 years, as it has
That's longer.
been, as it has been.
That's why I like
Right.
the idea of a moratorium. And that way, if there's pressure to build, housing or it has to go to other districts who haven't done their share.
Moratorium.
Well,
is
that's in the
great.
details of the fair share targets.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you
Okay,
know what,
let's-
actually, so that's another point, so underneath, for districts that fall short of their fair share targets, why don't we say for districts,
Far
Which-
exceeding.
Yeah, see,
for districts
Which meet and
by-
succeed and exceed?
which meet or
No,
exceed
it has to be
their-
far exceeding, because they say that the target is the bottom level
right,
base, so
you have
if
to
you
meet the
meet it,
target.
that's fine, you can still do more.
Which exceed.
And would you wanna
their
identify what's far exceed?
fair
Is it
share
10%?
targets.
50%?
I don't think we would be helped by that though, just so
That's
you
not
know, because
So
we're
it's
like
exceed
kind
the
of,
targets.
you know,
In the middle.
Shouldn't have to
we're
be
in the
more.
middle
Yeah.
by a wide margin.
There's gotta be flexible. That
There
means
should
I've got
be a
100-unit building, and it's like, oh no,
moratorium
you can only build
on
80 of those, cause those other ones
further-
put the district over the limit.
Well, there needs to be a point where the
Right, there's
infrastructure
gotta be
meets the
some,
development, right?
Well, that's part of the assessment, you have to look at infrastructure,
right, but
environmental.
then the one you call the blow the whistle. further
As soon
down.
as
To your
Right.
point,
So if I build 80, then I have to stop
realistically,
and
the
put the final
developer
20.
is still gonna present
No.
the
it's
most.
not
That-
required.
yeah.
It's gonna be
Yes,
rare
yeah.
where they listen to the community, they don't do that now,
Yeah.
you know, every,
Also because
But it could be like-
projects, we're
I'm
gonna
not saying
look at
stop.
them in a different
I know, it could be a
light,
development.
to be taken seriously.
It's just
Okay, there we go.
enforcing
Right.
it is
No, no,
super,
I'm just
gonna be
referring-
Benny,
really complicated.
what do you
their
think?
point.
Right.
So,
Um,
with that being said,
so
they're
this is
still gonna
received at
present
fair
the
share
project
time.
wherever they,
A
cause they
wide
have the money,
margin?
everything is, who has the money to
Why
buy the
why a wide
property.
margin?
If
That's
for
what I
them,
said
it's not
earlier.
economical to build
I'd
it
say even a narrow
close,
margin, I mean,
you know,
I mean,
oppositional
as soon as they exceed the
location.
Or
targets,
significant
they
margin.
should not be required
It's
to
where they wanna
take
build
on any
it.
more
I
projects.
mean, a wide margin would be double.
But fair share already says that that's not, the target is a base, a bare
Yeah.
minimum.
I mean, how's it right? We
So
can
meaning
build
it
so
doesn't mean
much
that
in
you're
this
exempt.
district.
Right.
So
It just
what,
means you're on
so
target.
what do we think the level should be? I mean, if you double your target, I mean, what do you
It's
think?
yet to
way
be
too-
determined, but there should be a threshold at which you don't have.
But just so you guys know, we're not gonna be helped by that, cause we're kind of in the middle on all of these things.
This is why
No, they,
I don't want to be.
I still think it's good to have it out there, I mean, just to know what our position is.
I mean, that's fine, you know, it'll mean that like Williamsburg will be able to say no to further development, that's what it boils down to, or the South Bronx, or whoever, you know, like that's who's gonna be able to say no.
Oh, and that's fine. I mean, right? I mean, there are
That's
people
fine
like
with
us who
me.
live there, and that's fine for
That's
them.
fine with
Those
me, I don't care.
burdens
They
should
might
always
like
be on
the
them.
thing also. Some people
Right.
might.
but it's not about what people like, I thought we were talking about equity and fair
Right, but
share.
we're talking about the wide margin, what is the scale?
No, but we can't keep trying to envision other people going against what we're trying to be with the community plans, like you're saying. If we're talking about people need to do their share, then if realistically, as we know, South Bronx has done a lot of development, and
Yes, and Queens.
let's say Queens or Harlem hasn't, let's just stay simple and to the point, that's the point.
Okay, so now, is there anything else that we need to talk about, or can we talk about Vinnie's proposal?
Yes, there is something else I would like to talk about. Time limit this to 10 minutes, and
Okay.
I don't care where we land. I have a question to the group.
Yes.
Why are we opposed to proposals to perhaps make the borough president's review and the community board's review happen at the same time?
Have you heard Reynoso?
Is
Speak about the
Reynoso-
community board?
Reynoso is not a friend of this community.
Right.
The man
Of
is up
any
for
community
re-election
board.
right now. We're talking about a charter that's gonna
He
be.
said that he has no respect for the voice of the community board.
He has
Totally.
no
And he spoke
consideration.
at
He
the
said
charter.
that in
He does
the
not want the
meeting.
community board involved in
He
anything,
spoke at the city
period.
charter in
At
favor
all.
of it.
That's funny
At all,
considered.
yes.
He's the head of.
Heard, we don't like Reynoso, some of us, fine.
Oh,
Why-
it's not that
how
people
does
don't
that
like
take
him,
away
we like him a lot.
If we
power?
answer that question.
Because
It's gonna dilute our
How-
voice.
If so- how does
it takes away some of the independence because
Yes.
the borough president already has essentially the final say on who gets
Yes.
appointed to those
He already
boards.
has, yes.
And so if you put them together, you're really just kind of like lumping, like,
It
You're diminishing your voice.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, if we're doing an independent review process for 60 days, and they're doing their own independent review process of this application, which is how it works now. My understanding of the proposal is to just do those things at the same time. It's not to say you have to work with the borough president's
Right.
office to complete your review. We can do our work in the same
It's
60
one
days.
vote, there's
that-
only one vote that's gonna be captured.
Okay,
Instead of
so
us
let
having
me,
our
so let
separate.
me, so let me.
Cause that
give you
happens
another-
now, it overlaps now, usually we
It's-
have our vote lately, we vote, and the next week he's
He
scheduling
votes.
his hearing.
But let me give you
I think it's kind of
another-
like that now.
Yeah.
Let me give you
Working.
another reason
So
to
why
have
is that-
this,
why are we
to have a
opposed to it?
separate review period that comes after hours, right? And this actually speaks to one of his priorities, which is he feels that there are inequities in the borough. And I think that should be addressed not by the borough president single-handedly saying, you know, this is what I think, and, I don't like you people, I like you people, right? I think that's dangerous actually for an elected official. I think that the borough board should
I need to
use that.
source some back.
Can I finish? I think that the borough board should vote on these individuals, should use that 30-day review period to call up and vote on an individual ULURP application after the community board has voted on it. So, you know, whether we voted yes or no, the borough board can choose to take it up and vote on it. So that way, if the majority of the borough disagrees with that community board because they think they're being NIMBYs or whatever, they can vote the opposite way. And that's a way of centering the borough-wide perspective without the borough president personally having to go against one of his community boards, right? And so that's why I think there should be a separate review period to give the borough board time to vote after the community board.
It also does provide for some, at least historically for this community board, another opportunity for testifying in just like another potential time to do
More
that.
deliberation.
Yeah, and timing does matter. I mean, like that's why we file Article 78 sometimes on developments, because what happens in a matter of 3 months can actually change. Like the reason that we don't have the Spice Factory as a monstrosity that it was going to be is because of what happened with the other rezoning on Franklin that we were able to delay, just by a little bit of delay. So like it does cumulatively matter, I guess, is the thing I'm saying. So I think it is important to have that time. Like it does, yeah.
And so, just to understand why we believe that power is being taken away from the community board by doing those reviews at the same time. If they combined them but gave the whole period a 90-day phase, would that still... Is the issue that there's not enough time already for the community board to review? Or is it just like there's an inherent issue with completing a review at the same time?
Well,
as the
I
borough
think we
president?
want the borough president to see what we said too.
Right.
Yeah.
He should take that into account,
Is
as should
there-
the borough board.
And
Is
he,
there a
and he
universe
has, and
in
he
which
has.
all of us working on the same review at the same time maybe encourages us to work together a little bit more to understand where this
It
is?
doesn't work that
Doesn't
way.
work that way.
They're a governmental
Unfortunately.
agency where people, y'all work for free, I say it all the time, we
I
never
would,
even less.
borough
And
president.
wait, and
don't have
the
that
borough president always
responsibility.
says that he's looking at it from a wider lens. We're looking locally at the local impact, he has a wider
Don't
lens,
we
he's
really
looking
should
borough
look at it,
wide.
'cause we live here?
And so to combine those two, to me, will dilute
And
Yeah.
who funds
our
him?
perspective, and
Yeah,
he
what are-
doesn't
what
have
are-
time to.
It's
what are their
always gonna be
interests, you know?
inherent.
Right.
It always will be.
That's the
This
thing.
is
Yeah.
politics.
I hear what you're all saying. I'm not hearing how our work necessarily has to change with those being truncated, but I
So how would you see the process working?
I mean, I just think it's,
Overlap.
I just think
Vote at the
that's
same
one of the
time?
more innocuous proposals that was in the charter review.
I would-
I don't see
We
how
have
that,
not historically had.
The Trojan horse.
reviews the borough president.
that's
gonna-
fine.
And I think that
But-
anything that's making it onto a charter revision is by default not meant to be innocuous. I think there's purpose to it.
I mean, the charter is like the most.
you know, like, I
exciting
just
to
governing
read
document
and
of-
understand and comprehend and try to think through
Yeah.
how it'll land, but
Yeah,
I
I
hear
think
what you're
it's like that seems to me like something, and I don't know exactly what it is. It seems to me like there's something there that makes them, that they feel like is going to shave a good portion of time off, and we want to avoid that. So
30
we just
days.
right.
It's not that much of a time.
There's not much of
given
a time there.
the
I mean, we've
years
been
that
through
are-
this, so
Yeah.
it's not
Yeah,
a
I mean,
whole lot
some
of
of these
time.
people are years in the pre-certification
Sure.
phase, okay? So, like, at the typical, like, when I looked at the list of affordable developments, the typical time is 3 years. The bigger ones, like Vital Brooklyn, 10 years or more. I mean, the extra month is nothing. Why do they want it? They want it because they want to forestall community board opposition.
They should also get rid of the little loophole of what happens with the summers and when.
Yeah, I was just thinking
always
about
do
that.
that shit.
Because they
Yeah,
start
submit in
something
July.
Holiday.
at the beginning of the summer when we're all on break, and then by the time we come back, they don't
We
have time.
should pause the clock.
So we gotta keep
Yes.
going. So let's talk about.
Can we put that in to that?
That'd
we-
be good to.
Pause it.
Yeah.
We've gotta keep going. Let's talk about
Half of the
Vinnie's,
charter.
let's talk about Vinnie's proposal, okay? So requiring increases in permitted height or density, so first Hector's proposal, okay? So, has everybody read Hector's proposals? Okay, so these are at the end, and whereas Community Board 9 has observed a consistent trend in mayoral attempts, blah, 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 blah. Therefore, Community Board 9 resolves that we oppose charter reform proposals that further increase the influence of the mayor and developers. at the expense of other players in the ULURP process. Including but not limited to, okay, so I had bullet points here to make it a little bit easier to read. Do you mind if I put those back in?
I see them here. I think that they're. This, right?
Just reading it here.
Yes, the allowing the community boards to vote for multiple members of the city planning
Yeah,
commission.
page break.
And therefore, Community Board 9 resolves that we support increasing the influence of the community by allowing the community boards to vote for multiple members of the City Planning Commission and reducing the number of members of the Planning Commission appointed by the mayor. Those were Hector's two proposed changes. We had a long discussion about it the last time where we weren't completely resolved on exactly how the vote would take place. But I think a lot of people liked the idea of us having a more direct representation and independent representation on the planning commission.
I think that that's
Allowing-
what we should say.
Allowing city planning commission veto power over council votes? I don't know about that.
No.
That's what it says. Allowing the city planning commission veto
I think you
power
have to
over.
go to this section that's further down. Literally in right there.
The second,
Yeah.
allowing, okay, but city planning commission veto power,
That's, we oppose that.
okay,
Yeah,
all right,
those are
that's not clear.
Okay, can we finish talking about?
I think it should be at the beginning of
Can we
each
finish talking
line.
about Hector's and then we can go back to anything else?
Allowing the community board to vote for multiple members of the city planning commission?
I think we should say something along the lines of what you said in describing it, which is that more more voice from the community boards directly on the city planning commission. I don't think we could recommend an election be exclusive to city or to sort of, what are we called? City council. We're not
Community
council
district.
members. To community board members, thank you. I don't think we could recommend that, you
That
know,
we're allowed to appoint members?
or that like a vote be exclusive to us
No,
rather than like what's the reason for not making it
we're
something that goes up for vote for the entire city?
No, we're saying that the board would be allowed to add members to the city planning commission. So the mayor appoints, we want to be able to appoint a few commissioners
Which
that
I
are
think,
independent of the mayor.
How would we do that, though?
that's what I'm saying. I don't think that there's like,
Vote?
There's a
There's boards.
we can't like, that feels like turning this conversation or turning this sort of charter revision into something that is like about pulling more power for the community boards. I think
You mean like the way that the mayor's doing that for himself?
Our own voice, like
Sure,
what he's doing,
sure.
I don't know.
I think in the same
What's
vein
wrong with that?
that we've been talking about, or in a conversation where they're trying to think about all of these different changes that affect community board input, we could say, we think wherever you all land, there needs to be more community board voice on the city planning commission, right? But I don't think that we can create a process for that is exclusive to,
So you could say recommend.
So how would
Even
how would we have a
recommend, you
voice
could
on the city
definitely
planning
recommend.
commission if we?
I kind of do right now, by the way. I can always get the commissioner to do something.
So,
If you wanna take
we
away
did talk about
I'll
this a
answer
little bit
your
last time. Hector was saying that he felt it should be limited to this group because we're more aware of these issues. And there was another proposal to say that rather than having a direct vote, that you would allow the community board ULURP chairs to rotate, a number of positions among themselves or something like
Yeah.
that. So all of these
59.
proposals are fine. I think they're all good and interesting proposals. We can either leave it vague or we can pick one and put it in. What do you guys want to do?
Oh, I'm pretty fine.
vague like that, honestly. I
Yeah.
think that would be the way to go.
But how exactly would that be done,
What does that
though?
mean?
I mean, what does it mean? I think we need a little something more.
I mean, any proposal is gonna likely increase the number of commissioners.
Right.
And that increase is gonna come from lay people that are, like, we don't necessarily have to identify what kind of lay people, but just, I mean, like, I'm working on legislation right now for the Rent Guidelines Board, and it's like very complicated how you constitute these boards, but you do have to be really specific about like what kind of background they have, like what kind of background check they're gonna have,
Right.
like all of those things. And that matters in terms of how things, like, what are the reasons that there's only 2 tenant representatives on the Rent Guidelines Board is because they require all of this stuff, but tenants
Right.
just simply cannot.
To
Like,
meet.
under no circumstances would they be able to, fulfill these things, so you end up with all real estate executives on the Rent Guidelines Board, that's how it works. So, you have to be specific, but also not super,
Detail.
right, it's kind of a weird, so I mean, I think you could say,
understand the difficulty.
Yeah.
Honestly.
So I mean, I think now, like, I mean, you could say, increase the number of commissioners and make that increase happen. I don't know if you want to say members of the community, or if you want to say.
With input from the community.
Well, we
Yeah.
just said
Yeah.
appointed by members of the community, however that appointment happens.
Okay, how about this? Oh,
I mean, I had an idea last week about having ULURP chairs rotate.
which I thought was a good idea, you know.
I'm sure.
But there's 59.
But honestly,
But
as
there's-
I was saying to someone this afternoon, I don't think I would benefit from that because we're all term limited, and by the time any such
Exactly.
proposal
Talking about
passes,
59.
we'll all be gone.
Bye-bye.
Okay, but
59.
I think it's the right thing for the community. So, all right. So why don't we say, what if we said something like, by adding multiple member, by allowing the public to directly elect multiple members of the commission, because like the one, I guess the one workable example that I can think of that's like this is elections for county committee, where we like literally elect like hundreds of people every, what is it, 2 years?
2 years.
So, and although there are lots and lots of criticisms of the process, it goes
Yeah.
on and it's
Like a
somehow
freaking
works,
ball.
you know?
You know why?
So
How do you define works?
what?
How do you define works?
It doesn't work. It works for the people who control the process, especially in Kings County. It is
Which is
the
what I'm
worst
raising, by the way,
situation
exclusive,
ever.
making this seat exclusive to community board members.
Okay, so show of hands, who wants to, who wants to have an election by the public at large, and who wants to have an election restricted to community board members? Public at large, raise your hands. I'm actually
If
okay
I'm
with
choosing
that.
an election, but maybe we don't even do that, and we just say
it's gonna be
that
appointed.
there needs to be more seats created on the city planning commission, filled by community members, and leave it at that.
Yeah,
Okay, I like that one.
I'm good with that.
And if you wanna like make a distinction, you could say.
Elected
I don't
or
know how
appointed?
you would frame it, like I said, I'm doing this for the Rent Guidelines Board, where we said with a background in, like usually like the requirements spell out like with a background in finance or background in housing or whatever, like you could just say.
And equitable and affordable housing.
Yeah,
Okay, but, so if we said something like adding multiple members of the planning commission to represent the community, what exactly does that mean? Because someone's going to
Anybody can say
appoint
they
them.
represent.
And so ultimately, they're gonna represent whoever they appoint.
It has to be
Not the public.
designated from the community or from the community.
But what does that mean? And who appoints them? The
We
key
do
thing
have-
is who appoints them. If they're not gonna be elected, who appoints them?
Maybe that's a way to bring back the council and having them appoint these folks.
But they can point anyway.
we're also talking about consent power too, like,
Still leaving out.
that's actually a really easy way to balance these things out, is to force consent on everybody that's appointed by anybody. And that way you have a lot of checks and balances.
Okay, so that's another thing that we can add. Who is in favor of having,
I mean, I think that is the case already for the city planning commission. I mean, they do have to get approval from the council. I know that because there was somebody that was supposed to, well, Sia was supposed to be on the city planning commission, and Lori blocked her, so, because of the, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, that's who was supposed to be, now it's Leah Goodrich, who Jamani appointed, but it was supposed to be
Right.
Sia, who led that campaign for the armory.
So, who's in favor, okay, so who's in favor of having it be, restricted to any kind of election or process restricted to community board members?
Election, and then you're gonna start getting into campaign financing and financial disclosure. It gets super complicated for us.
So do we like
Pretty
so who
minor.
likes the rotating thing? Vinny
I don't
likes
think
it?
that makes much of a
Hector, do you like it?
Yeah, I like it.
That's the most impact here. Everything else is doing the same stuff.
What are you saying, having a public vote?
I think if you're trying to indicate that you want a change here, that's the only one that's gonna include the people's voice. Rotations, elections with community boards, and the council, which already stands, is still gonna include people appointing their own interest.
But you have to have people that actually understand the process.
Right.
But
Yeah.
Cheryl and
people in the
Teresa
community are
haven't.
dumb. And I
Cheryl-
think we need to
No,
stop doing that.
No,
Every-
I'm not saying that
didn't know
people are
anything-
dumb.
no,
It
but
takes
to
a
be
lot,
clear,
it takes
I
a lot
didn't
to
know anything
understand.
about any of this before I arrived, and this is no disrespect to anybody. I'm more educated when it comes to people who are marginalized from my hearing of y'all conversations than what I've heard here. That's not incorporated. Everybody's talking about property owners and this, which is fair. But people who are the people who's gonna be suffering or the direct targets of all of these developments aren't ever here. And we have to be honest about that. So it's not because you're using big language, you change methadone clinic and shelter to locally unwanted land uses that we won't be able to identify what you mean. That's my point here. If you're trying to make a change, I think we're wasting time by trying to figure out things that are already in initiation. So if you just wanna be realistic and say you wanna make a change, then just indicate the portion that's gonna be most effective to that. Otherwise, I think at this point, y'all just pick which one if that's the point. If you wanna do rotation, cause it's not gonna change anything.
All right, Cheryl and Teresa, I haven't heard from you on this.
So I'm sitting back and learning, just like you said. I'm listening and learning. But as far as, we're talking about adding to the,
Right, so
City
So
planning
Hector's
commission.
basic idea was, let's let the community boards directly choose commissioners. So, because the problem that a lot of us have is we feel that the commissioners are beholden to the mayor and elected officials who don't represent us
Well,
and don't represent our views.
I personally agree that someone that lives in the community that is taking part and involved in the community, maybe they can also, like what I did for Vital Brooklyn, I went out door to door, literally. So many people had no idea. So you have to get people that is gonna be engaged. There's also, I don't know if they're still around, Black Association presidents. I think everyone should have like a small community involved, where they would have a person that knows what's going on in each community, bring it to the community board, and the community board is supposed to represent the actual community. So it
That's
should.
different than this
Right, but
commission
we're
is
talking
citywide.
about the commission.
Right, I understand, right,
Which
but
has
that's
to
what I'm
work
saying,
on it.
but the community board, right, someone,
Right.
I agree with the rotation of a ULURP person that's in the community board, because they are the ones that should have more understanding about what goes on in the community. So what I'm saying is that ULURP person has to have a rapport, a reputation, a rapport, right, first time, with the community to have understanding of what's going on. And we have to develop more, Black Association presidents, let people be more involved. Do they want to? Will they? We don't know, and that's the issue that we're dealing with. So as far as ULURP and someone in the ULURP, I think should be involved in the city process.
Or Teresa, what do you think?
I agree with it, but I also, I'm looking at who is on the commission, and there's this individual who recursed himself from the 7399 commissioner who has been on the city, Joseph Dewick. Like, we want to make sure we have representation that's really from the community and not somebody with a business interest that's on the board. Why is that happening?
That's because what the pool that they pick out of is the people that are working on this stuff professionally, and that's, you
Right.
could have like a business brother.
This is all
So
just a
how do you want it
suggestion
to
anyway.
work?
Right.
Is
It's
it
not
that,
even gonna,
because now, if we pick community members in Brooklyn won't have an idea necessarily of what the
Right.
development
Step
projects
down.
are in Manhattan and what the issues are there. So is that if we're rotating, do we rotate
Based on the borough,
based on
right?
what projects are coming up?
I think so, yeah.
And the applicable
Or is it-
land use or
Well, but in a
community
given
boards are
se-
represented?
in a given session, though, they'll hear things from multiple boroughs, so I
Well,
think-
then maybe a representative from each community board in which the development is happening should
59.
be on that, right? Should be
Okay,
there.
so how about this,
59.
adding five?
59, big number.
Adding five representatives who
I think allowing a person
Usually
from
have
each
like
year
two
list.
chosen
So-
from among community board,
It becomes a very
land
big room.
use, members,
At a given hearing, usually we'll have
representing.
At least one person from that community board that's being
Okay, adding five representatives or chosen.
Right, yeah.
discussed, right?
And,
But that's not.
Or
and
the
then what
zoning.
we want to talk, or
I don't know.
what we consider is important for our district, is way very different than what Bay Ridge thinks is important for their district. So
So we should
Bay
have,
Ridge may want development here to take pressure off
Here's the thing,
them.
adding one community board person isn't going to change really the makeup of the planning commission.
Right. I
think
The
in
idea is to give the public a really strong voice, right? So somebody was said five, they suggested like five positions and then rotate.
I'm saying,
One
in
per
addition to this rotation, you should have at least one of the people in the rotation should be from the
From
community
the
that
board-
that the
from
project
the-
is in.
Five
So
representatives.
you'd have to change the requirements.
And they're not gonna do that though.
We could, I mean, you could like,
I think it could be the chair or somebody within the committees, the ULURP committee on each board, because we're supposed to be empowered. Our ULURP was designed, the community boards were designed to be empowered within the ULURP process. That's why community boards were created originally, right?
Adding five representatives who are chosen
So-
from among community board land use members representing each borough on a rotating basis.
And y'all should tell Fred why he shouldn't be the person to represent
One
on
person,
this board.
Well, a chair,
On this-
chair isn't supposed to have an intimate knowledge
I'm
of
just
the
raising
ULURP,
the
right?
challenge that like,
okay, can
it's
you
crazy
They're supposed to
to
move
create a
things
role for
along.
yourself
Can you
in
guys
something.
pay attention to the language that I'm writing?
Fred's on the
Adding
board.
five representatives who
Yeah.
are chosen from among community board land use members representing each borough on a rotating basis, and one person from the community where the application is being reviewed.
One person from the community, one person from the community board, land, ULURP.
From the
oh, I see
community
what you're saying, so
board.
this is, so we're creating like a separate role that's
Yeah.
not a commissioner.
Adding five
That's
representatives.
something else, right?
chosen
Okay.
from
Adding
among-
five voting representatives.
You have a better chance of influencing the people on the commission itself.
8:55.
To
I
the
know.
city
Than this rep-
planning commission were chosen from, okay. Reducing the number of members of the planning commission appointed by the mayor. He currently appoints 7 out of 13.
7 out of 13.
So that gives him a majority no matter what.
Right.
So it should be 5. I'm just throwing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, the mayor doesn't need two whole review processes that they are in control of. They are already in control of their own process that happens at the city council, so there's no need for them to have that much say.
So we're
in the
good
city
with
planning
this
commission.
change?
Did you change it to 5?
I just said reducing, because to go down from 7, it could be 6, it could be 5, I mean, you know,
Are the
So
commissioners
that
paid?
means you would only get 1 or 2.
I believe they
As far
are.
as I
Yes.
Okay, so then
So they're not
these
gonna
would be paid
definitely have
positions.
5. This doesn't make sense.
So gonna be creating.
That's what he was working on.
How about this, adding 5 volunteer voting representatives to the city
Paid?
planning commission, right? Because if you ask for money, there's a reason not to give it to you.
Right, yeah, the commissioners get paid.
Okay, so Are we good with,
One
are
second.
people good with, is there
But you-
still objection
If
to
you're not,
this?
if these members from the community are not gonna be paid, they're not gonna be replacing the mayor's,
Correct. They're adding to the
Yeah.
total.
They're
So you're just adding to
they're,
the total.
they're voting
Ah.
representatives,
They're not
but
commissioners.
they're gonna do it on a
So it's-
rotating basis, so everybody's probably only gonna serve like once, you know, unless there's an application from their district.
So instead of 13, what do you envision?
It could be 18.
18.
I think the language is a little
But
tricky.
that
It
adds to the
should say,
total,
I
because you
think,
don't, we won't be able to
I
take
don't
power
think
away.
that 5 people
directly.
from,
Right. You can
one
dilute it.
from
You can
each
dilute it.
borough, and then, a sixth person, are you saying?
No, she's saying 5 because that's for representative.
But one of those 5 is gonna be from the
And
from
including
the,
one person from the community board.
Of the application.
Okay, so, all right, I'm sorry, we really have to get
Wrap this
going.
up.
Okay, so
Okay.
reducing the number of members of the planning commission.
Because it's not one
Yes.
application at a time.
Anyone who's
Doc.
opposed, raise your hand. Okay,
But the one person from the community board, you're talking about generally. Because
From
the
the
other
ULURP
ones
board?
are chosen from the land. use
yeah,
committee.
from the land use committee.
yeah.
There should be land use committees.
And why are we so opposed to just saying that we think there should be more community or community board voice directly on the planning commission?
So we
I thought
we
that what
agreed,
we're
we discussed this
adding.
extensively
So
already,
the
we need to
difference
move on.
between-
I didn't
the
understand- I didn't
public,
catch it.
Is that what you're
So-
saying?
Well, yeah.
But the thing is that there's more than one application.
We need to talk about Benny's proposal.
In a hearing.
So, the requiring increases in permitted height or density to be approved by a 2/3 majority of property owners within 500 feet of the upzoning site, or in cases of increases greater than 50%, 2/3 majority within 2,000 feet of the site.
It's similar to like having a block party, so I think it's good. You need 2/3 to have a block party, so.
Yeah, this is much more than a block party.
Yeah.
I know, but that's just like a
So
good,
the complaint was this would leave out tenants.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which is fair enough. On the other hand, I would say a 2/3 majority is actually, within 500 feet, is actually quite a high bar. And I really think in most cases, what you're gonna see is homeowners saying no.
Yeah.
The big landlords
Saying yes.
are not gonna say no to this, right? I mean, except in cases where it's like right next to them and it's like creating a problem for their foundation, blocking their windows, in which case the tenants would oppose it as well, right? I mean, I've definitely seen those cases where like people had to be evacuated from their buildings because there was a next door development that was destabilizing it.
Suki.
Yeah.
I would add primary residence homeowners. People that actually live there, that own property.
I just see this as another way for certain communities to block everything.
And
And,
unless you can think of some way to include, like, maybe by parcel, you could do percentages that way. And that way, if that parcel happens to be in a rent stabilized building, then all the tenants in that building have to come up with that vote, whatever that is. Otherwise, you're, like, it wouldn't make sense in terms of.
oh, you're
like-
saying like the tenants next door would be able to have one vote
Right,
based on their,
exactly. But the people that live there, not necessarily who owns it, but the people that live there.
I
I mean,
see.
it kind of gets complicated.
It does get complicated. I think it's tricky, but like, I like the idea of
So just including in the areas that have overdone their share. I think we're going back to the initial conversation here, because if you have to do your share, the development has to be directed somewhere. Otherwise, we're getting nowhere here. No
Right, but
property
I
owner wants any building built.
I think this is more specifically about, you know, some specific, regardless of whether you've done your fair share, some specific development might really impact someone. You know, like I had a neighbor that lived in a rent stabilized apartment building in a ground floor apartment, and a building went up right next to her. It turned, as it happened, that one was as of right, but it was like so close to her windows.
Mhm.
And that was her only window, and she was cut off, and she couldn't stand it. She complained to her landlord. The landlord went to court. The landlord got a settlement, because property owners actually do have those right when somebody else
Right.
is impacting your property that way. So she asked for a rent abatement, because the law actually gives tenants the right to sufficient light and air.
Yep.
And he gave her a few $100s off her rent, but it wasn't enough to make up for living in a cave.
Yeah.
And she ultimately left the state because she couldn't find another
Well,
affordable
that was
apartment.
before City of Yes.
But the
too, because City
realistic
of
thing,
Yes
they
says
wouldn't
you
have
can
taken
do
her
that.
voice anyway, they would have still built it. And
Yeah,
that goes
if
back
it's
to
as
the
a right.
as well, as far as that's gonna be the conditions for the ULURP, where you have to make some of those things to happen. This is New York City,
Yeah.
somebody's gonna be locked, period. Tree's gonna be locked. They wanna build, that's the only thing that's gonna be done. What they should do, like we said, is not a housing crisis, an affordability crisis.
Well-
Make the units that are already there
Okay.
affordable, we're gonna have that issue, but
But-
that's not gonna happen though.
Right,
So
but that's
the
not,
majority realization, is to Nicola's point, is majority of those places that have not done their share are just gonna keep using that to deny it. That's, I think we have to
Yeah,
start
I get her
realistically
point,
look at
too.
what's the majority or what's not, otherwise we're constantly gonna be stockhold held.
Exempting.
well, but I think that's half of the problem, right, is that some areas get to block it. The other half of the problem is we don't get to block it because of our zoning, right? All of these areas get to block it because their existing zoning
Right.
basically says you can't build anything there. And so in order to build anything, you have to go through all of these levels of government to rezone. In our area, the existing zoning already says you can build pretty much anything, anywhere you want, except for like a few blocks here and there. And we have to jump through all of these hoops to try and change that, to say, no, you can't. And so we have like the entire, like, you know, we have like all these forces that are trying to stop it. And so the point is like, we have no leverage to say no, right? If we had the leverage to say no, we could then make the decision, the trade-off, like, okay, if it's really this affordable of a development, if it's really bringing that many benefits, we could make the trade-off. We're not even in a position to make the trade-off because our existing zoning allows the developers to do whatever they want. And that's not the case in those other communities. And that's a big part of the disparity too, right?
But in this charter, if any of these is implemented, that fair housing framework will be implemented to where that zoning will change. And that's why nobody is against this, but you should just input that language once again.
No, the
Just-
fair housing framework is not gonna change our zoning.
But
It's just gonna
not for
say,
us, for those places that didn't do the fair share, obviously if that's the blockade that is inhibiting them from doing so, they would have to change that according to that framework.
but I'm saying that that isn't the only problem, right? That's one part of the problem, is that it's harder for developers to build there. The other half of the problem is it's way too easy for them to build here.
Right.
And
But that's
nothing
not-
about the fair housing framework is gonna change that.
But we haven't been fighting as of right development. We've been fighting rezonings.
Well,
On top of the fact that we already
You
have.
haven't been
Real-
fighting as of right development, but there are a lot of other people in the community who come to us to complain about as of right development, including like my neighbor, who basically got displaced from her apartment by an as of right development.
The problem with that is that
This won't stop that.
these people have, if you own a lot and you're building as of right, as in
Mm-hmm.
according to what the zoning is for that area, you have rights to do that the same way people in the community have the right to fight you. And so it's, you know, it's
There's
it's
really
just
no
an
teeth in
inherent
the fight
conflict.
against it.
I'm
Yeah,
just
it's
saying.
as
This
of right.
proposal wouldn't stop as
When
of
it's as
Right.
of right,
Right.
you can't really
Right.
fight it.
So
There's
if you
nothing
don't
you could
say the
do.
places that done their
There
fair
is not
share,
nothing but.
you can put the aspect of that already have a large amount of the development.
Okay, let's just do a quick survey of the committee here. Yes, no,
Yes, no,
we need
what?
to change.
Add
To this proposal, yes, no,
Just this bullet?
As in,
yes,
are we
no,
completely
or
Are we
taking this
including
out?
it? Are we
Yes.
taking it out?
Are
Or what
we
do I-
including it, are we taking it out, or are we modifying it?
Before can you just make it more specific to, like you said, the locations that done their fair share, or that already have that development, for example, like us, who it's too easy for it to be built here.
Okay, that's a
That's
proposal.
what I've been saying, just make it more specific.
So just
But
add,
this is, wait, increases to permitted height. So this is a rezoning.
Right.
This is related to rezonings, not as of right.
Yes, yes. Okay, so do people like the idea of
To
for
be
districts
minimal.
which have
Locations.
done their fair share of affordable housing?
No,
And then where
I
does
don't see
it
what that
say
has to do with
fair share?
anything.
I think we
Where
just
do you
need to
fit?
chop this bullet.
Okay,
Yeah.
Just take
All
it
right,
out.
let's
I'm
go
voting
around.
for take it out.
okay, Josh was to take it out.
This
Hector?
is confusing it more. This
Oh,
charter
yeah. Go
provision
around.
is to get them to.
Get
be
back
Vinny
to
is
me.
a
He
yes,
wants it.
obviously. Okay,
and be more
John?
equitable. So
I'm gonna
you can't
pass
say,
it.
this is not gonna
I
change
like
that.
it.
Yes.
But with the extra
That's not there
about
yet.
the fair
That's not-
share.
That's not there yet.
So.
You're voting on this.
I mean,
Oh, we're
there would still be
voting? We're
property
voting?
owners.
I thought
You're
we're
getting,
just,
you get a sense of
I
the
mean,
board.
Vinny, what,
Oh.
I think the
I thought we
objection
were
is
just-
that only property owners would be voting.
Primary residents,
Okay.
primary residents, homeowners.
And I have
Those are the
But
I'm
most
stuck
okay.
on the, I'm
most
we should
impacted.
put what this young lady said for.
Okay. Although you realize that requiring a 2/3 majority of residents and property owners is an almost impossible hurdle.
It's not gonna
and
happen.
that's what
It's
I'm
not
stuck
gonna
on.
happen.
I'm stuck on the 2/3
Yeah.
because
At what point are you going to
Okay.
take
Let
away
me suggest
people's
an
property
alternative.
values?
Okay.
I don't know.
So
I'm
requiring
not
a
worried about
2/3
value.
two-thirds.
I'm
Okay.
more worried
How
about.
do we do? How do we get
I'm
to 2/3?
gonna suggest an alternative. If
How do you do it?
25% of the
Signatures of all
residents within
homeowners
500
and
feet of the
renters.
upzoning
Not
site
renters.
oppose
Renters lose a
an
lot of money
increase
in their
in permitted
property.
height or density,
There's no way
then a
to do that.
2/3 majority of the
just have to
council
take this
must
out.
pass.
This is
Yeah, yeah,
really,
there's some, yeah, there's, I just thought
this
about
is a
this.
value and vision statement. This is
Okay.
meaningless. Take it out. Is
Okay.
my position.
I like the idea, but I think we should.
Yeah.
take it out.
Okay.
It's gonna be a little.
Yes.
I'm-
Can't even get signatures for a block party.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know, but it's just,
People
I'm
are-
seeing
Somehow we
it
get
as
it
a
through.
Sorry,
Good
Vinny, I didn't
thing.
mean
It
to
really
be so
is.
hard
That's
against you.
All right, guys,
Honestly.
I'm gonna suggest one more thing,
Time limit.
that I think would help increase the voice of the community. And if you look at this, ULURP process sheet, right, you'll see on the bottom left box, right? If CPC disapproves an application, all items are defeated except special permits if mayor certifies as necessary, zoning map and text changes, that's basically all rezonings, if mayor certifies as necessary, 197A plans if mayor requests approval, urban renewal plans per state law. If they disapprove, it moves to the if the mayor certifies as necessary, it then moves to the council where action requires a 2/3 vote or 3/4 in the event of an urban renewal plan. So obviously this kind of explains why the city planning commission is so beholden to the mayor and pretty much rubber stamps every development, because the mayors are usually very pro-development, right? Because he can override them no matter what, anytime he feels like it. So they probably feel like, what's the
They'll go with it
point?
anyway, right.
What's the point? I might as well, like, you know, like a lot of them will voice what sound like objections, but in the end, they vote yes anyway. And I think it's because they realize that there's no upside to voting no, because he can override them, and then he can not appoint them, reappoint them, right? So I think one way to maybe balance this would be to also give communities the power to override the city planning commission. So if the relevant community board, so hang
Not
on,
gonna happen.
Nicolette,
They don't even want us in the process.
hang on, Nicolette,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, though. They don't-
hang on, Nicolette, hang on.
They're like, I know you're just advisory, but you're annoying us.
Hang on to your hat.
That's cute.
If since the mayor gets this power, if we want to balance this, if the relevant community board and 2/3 of the relevant borough board vote in favor, they can override a city planning commission veto, and it then goes to the city council for a 2/3 vote. So just mirroring the power that's given to the mayor.
Okay,
It's not like technically unfeasible,
Simpler to implement,
I mean,
yeah.
how feasible is it to get a 2/3 vote of the borough
Of the
board?
borough board?
well,
I
yeah,
mean,
that would be the thing.
That's the same problem.
it's all the borough board is
It's
all
just
the heads of the community boards and the representatives of the council members for those districts.
how
So
are
it's
they
not
for
easy.
attendance?
What?
How are they for attendance?
I mean, I've heard it's a
on them.
problem, but you know what, if they realize they have actual power, they might start showing up.
And like Nicholas said, it depends on the
It
project.
depends on the project, and it depends on, you know, like I said, if they start to realize they have actual power, they might start showing up.
Sure. Why the hell not?
I mean, any interjection of community that late in the process would probably be useful, because we get sort of left behind in the dust in that initial period, and then a lot happens in that next,
Yeah.
in that next chunk. So like some sort of review
That
prior
might,
to like the final thing would be justified, I think.
yeah, because that might also encourage them to come to us ahead of time.
Yeah, exactly.
Rather
That's
than
the thing.
right at the end. It's like,
Benefits that we got here.
Alright, so does everybody like that?
Yeah,
Yes?
How about
Okay.
we just say, someone from a community board gets appointed mayor on a rotating basis? That person
They're
should
here.
sum up that.
We'll call them Mr. Mayor or
Yeah.
Ms. Mayor. Not
Since
Hey,
we're
quite.
throwing
we're gonna
everything
go
out
for it,
there.
go for it.
yeah, things might be very different soon.
Hopefully.
So this is only break in case of emergency. This is if CPC disapproves an application, right?
If the relevant community board and 2/3 of the relevant borough board
How often does the veto happen?
approve,
Veto? Oh, I
Did it
don't know.
happen once this year with,
yeah, it's not
To approve and disapprove, right?
the
twice a month or anything.
Twice a month?
No, it's not. It's
City.
unusual
It is a new.
because of just the process is so
where a
involved. Everyone's brought in
is
to
required.
approve things.
And I think Renoso's supposed to be
I mean, we got a veto on the Splash Factory because the mayor indicated that he would, and then as a result, the city planning commission did anyway.
So
We
you
didn't
did
have
the,
to veto it.
right,
They pulled out.
And this is to approve the disapproval? It's okay.
right.
This is to approve the
To
disapproval.
override a veto.
Yeah, to override a CPC veto.
Right.
Okay. So what else did we need to discuss, or can we vote?
This is after the mayor, or this is?
This is
before
after the
it-
city planning commission,
Before it goes to the mayor.
before it goes to the city
Council.
council, and before it goes to the mayor.
Okay, so we are saying that city council has voted, CPC has voted no on a project, and we're overriding that?
They
We're
actually-
overriding to say yes?
They never say.
We're
no.
Because they
overriding.
never say no.
Well, but actually that's because as they frequently stop projects before they even get there, right? I mean, a lot of times, like community might work really hard on a plan, like Chinatown, really hard on their community plan, and the city planning commission essentially told them it will never see the light of day.
Suki, we want the power to be able to override the mayor, no?
I'm
Well,
just thinking like.
I think that might be a big
That's a stretch.
ask.
What do we, I mean.
Bit of a stretch.
That might be a
CPC,
big ask.
if-
I mean, by
So
having
how
the
are we
power to
overriding?
override
Because
this
it's-
Well, I mean, the CPC is an arm of the mayor's.
That's- That is exactly what we're asking.
CPC.
I guess
what-
so, yeah.
What
But I mean, look,
what
I
project
think
would
it's,
we be opposing or wanting to push through that they're going to oppose?
Right.
A community plan that would actually pass. I mean, there's
About
been
something
dozens
we
and
wanna
dozens,
approve
and
and
maybe
we wanna
hundreds
propose.
written, and not a single one has ever passed. Like,
right.
197
And
days,
it's
like,
essentially
just like
because and the city-
punchline.
Right, the city planning commission essentially uses a pocket veto
Hmm?
all the time. And they reflect the mayor's view, who reflect the developer's view. A lot of times, like we've heard quite specifically from them, no, because developers want more. They want more, market rate floor area, they want less manufacturing, they want less affordable housing, so no. And to your point about why certain communities are not, doing enough affordable housing, a lot of them have actually asked, and the city planning commission has said no.
That's
A
what happened
lot
with,
of
that's what happened with
communities-
Soho.
A lot of
Yeah,
communities
that's
have
true.
asked for
I
mandatory
challenge it a lot,
inclusionary
but,
housing.
yeah.
And they
the
lost
planning
affordable
commission
housing.
has said no.
But that,
I'm not trying to get into
that
the
wouldn't
whole
be
debate.
this, because that never comes true though.
But anyway, so
I mean, I don't see, what's the point of this then, of the last amendment?
well, but we can, we can at least get past the planning commission to the city council, and we may still fail there, but at least you got one step, you've got one step further. Right,
I'm
at
just
least
thinking
you
about how,
got
like,
to-
no matter what,
At
starting
least
next
you got to
year,
a democratically elected body is all I'm saying.
I don't wanna.
no matter
Right.
what, starting next year, every project is gonna require lobbying the entire council.
Intense.
Like, that's what we're headed towards, which is like, could be good in some instances. I think in our case, like, basically anything is better than the input that we get right now, so. Like, I could actually do better at lobbying against or for a project right now if I could do it to the whole council, but it's still a lot of work. It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
If they actually do some sort of mandated getting rid of member deference, then
Okay, but
Yeah.
let me ask you a question. How do you get rid of member deference to one member without just getting rid of the city council's review altogether?
well,
Because that's what makes the council member able to override the.
It's like
He's
Parliament,
one council
right?
member out of
It's not
51.
about getting rid of member deference, it's not having the conversation end with the city council, which is what a lot of those proposals are about. Right now, the process ends with the city
It
council.
doesn't, it ends with the mayor, he has a veto.
Sure, but it ends with the council in 99.9% of times. And
'Cause it's like-
the mayor has a veto on everything as part of his
Right.
executive
I mean, it
powers.
seems to me like the issue is more like, as we've discussed before, empowering the other council members.
well, I'd say less empowering and like, if you were a council member and you had to face your community every time that there was a development happening, and you could find a way to actually not have to be responsible for that and be able to like, it's the easiest, like, it is in every way, shape, and form exactly what they want politically
That's
because
not a good
It's,
thing.
I think it's a
But then you were
layup,
hired
yeah.
for a job though.
That's
I
not a
mean,
good.
if they
not
have a
being
community
responsible for
telling them-
yeah, no, because I mean,
This
like, that's, they are much more concerned with
The people that vote and elect them.
right, exactly, and that's why, like, now they've lost the tool of even having like the, you know, the community preference or whatever. That was a huge tool that they had to be able to like get people in the community to support a particular project. Now they don't have that, and they, you know, they still took all this developer money. So now what are they going to do? It's like, all right, so now I can blame it on the entire council. It's not just on me. I can't just, you know.
Well, and there have been instances in the past when the entire council basically overrode one council member. Like Tom Gotti has told the story many times with Williamsburg, that their 197A plan went out to the council, and their council member, they didn't like how it turned out, and their council member was shut out of the land use committee hearings. The land use committee, the zoning subcommittee chair shut their member out of the hearings, and they rammed it through. Bloomberg's people rammed it through the full council.
And then you know with Kills.
So
And the reason
it
why
can
we
be
talk
done.
about that example is because it is not the rule. It was a extreme case that happened. And that's why we point to that as the example. But what happens regularly
Well, and
is
East New
member
York,
deference
to
is
choose
used
for
to block.
themselves.
East New York, didn't Charles Barron oppose that? They nevertheless rammed it through.
Well,
I mean, it happens when
They
they
didn't like
think
Charles
they
Barron.
can do it, right?
not liking Charles Barron was a big part of it too.
But he got his
Anything that-
affordable.
And he got
Thank
his
him.
100%
Yeah,
for
he
it.
had,
Sure
he
did.
did, he did
Yeah.
create a lot
Sure
of,
did.
a lot of housing there.
That man.
Yeah.
He's a force.
Not a good example for this.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
He
he's-
doesn't need to.
I think East Harlem also, Jerome Avenue, it's not clear to me that those council members really supported the rezonings, did they?
Yeah, no, they did. They did.
So they thought they were getting community
I mean, the
benefits that
community
didn't
boards did,
materialize.
that was for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, none of the people that live there, obviously. That's why they only made it, they only got 5 out of the 16 total rezoning that they were trying to get. Because it became politically untenable for the quality.
And, I mean, I think that's as it should be, that elected officials should be responsible to their constituents if their constituents are not happy.
We were also on that list.
Mhm.
We were on that list, and we and through sheer through sheer force of will, ended up not on that list anymore.
I don't know, that's not what I heard, but
That's
anyway,
what
that's another.
that's what what's his face? Who's the guy then?
Winston?
Yeah,
Mhm.
he was pissed about it.
Mhm.
He was real pissed about it.
Running for mayor?
Who's Winston?
He used to be the,
Land use.
yeah, he was the head of the city.
I know
planning
he was
commission.
pissed at me,
He's a
but I don't
finance?
think, I don't think
He
we
was
were
the head of
actually-
land use for the
I
city
don't think we were
council.
actually on
City
Blasio's
planning
list.
No, we weren't on
Back
15
in
list, no.
2014.
They were trying to add other neighborhoods.
Yeah.
At one point CB8,
Yeah.
at one point CB9.
And then I remember at some point there was a meeting there and people from our district were complaining and saying, why can't we have the same as Park Slope and Carroll Gardens? And he said, you will see that there will be some whiter, wealthier communities that will get rezoned. And then that's when Kiwanis rezoning.
Yeah, everyone has
Yeah, that's
That's not
not the
wealthier.
same.
Gowanus
No,
is not-
Gowanus was like, oh,
That's,
It's not one of. it's
that was not a
wealthy
white,
neighborhood.
wealthy neighborhood at all.
No, it's a,
no, it's,
Stinky canals
Toxic.
around
That would
it.
be more Soho, NoHo.
right.
yes,
Yeah.
I agree. It's what they
Let's do some of that. Show me
Well,
that.
okay, so
And
are
that
we
rezoning
ready
actually
to,
took away.
please,
Okay, let's go.
please.
So we really leaving this last board in there?
So
Take it
what's,
out.
I think it just tips us over the edge, because we have a lot of,
They're trying to get rid of
we're pushing a few
ULURP
things.
as
We're gonna
it
get
is.
to that and like, okay, this group is.
Bananas.
No, I think it's good. I think
Yeah,
it's-
Individual member
good.
veto power.
well, no, but listen, I think it's extraordinary that the mayor has the power to override city planning commission vetoes. In other words, they always have to say yes to. So, okay, he has that power, right, that whoever saw it way back when saw fit to give him that power. Like, why shouldn't we balance out that power with ours? At least make people look at this situation.
Because
It-
we're
it
advisory
sends a
and he's
point.
I
elected
would prefer to focus
to be the
on getting,
chief executive
getting
of the
community
city.
people on the commission. We
Yeah.
already have that, that's the
I mean, I
goal
think
now.
that's
Let's
about
focus
as,
on
I think
that.
that's about as likely to happen as anything. But then, like I said, what happens if the mayor can then override anything you do? Right? What's the point of being on the commission? You got on the commission, right? And now the mayor can override anything you do. You can keep saying no till you look you in the face, and he overrides you and sends that giant City of Yes package on to the city council.
Or a,
You see what I'm
Yeah,
saying? Like,
it
you
out.
you actually need both. You need both.
I
Then you're playing
don't
back
wanna
and
look
forth.
crazy.
Because
We're
it's-
right at that line.
I mean,
We're
we're
at
already,
that line.
we're
I mean, yeah.
responding to a set of charter revision proposals that were about curtailing and shifting community board power with a ton of recommendations to actually expand and increase it. And I think this just sends us right over the top, sorry.
Fine,
It just-
so
it
they're
does.
gonna say no, so they're gonna say no, and so that makes everything else look much more reasonable.
No, it looks
No,
like
that is a
it discredits
negotiating
everything else.
Unreasonable.
It discredits everything else because it's like, all right, these people are over the
Why
top.
is it, why is it more discrediting than asking to add our members to the planning?
Because it's to their point, it's basically
That's
saying
a big
community
ask
board
too.
mayor.
That's
At that
big
point,
enough.
you're saying it in plain language compared to the other recommendations that are specific to serve
Okay.
what we're asking for.
So so we have 3, right? Maybe they'll give us 1 out of 3.
Well, they're
Oh, they
not
aren't
gonna
giving
give
us
that one.
Okay.
So maybe
I
I
take
doubt we'll
that
get
out
any,
and
but
now
I
we
think,
want
I
to
think
do
it's okay to ask.
There are many things in here that I would have liked to be worded differently and many other things that I would have inserted, but in the effort to get us all home, I had to table some of those, Suki, and I think maybe this is one that, you know.
Well, okay, let's take a vote. Nicholas, a no.
I would
Okay,
I would make a modification, just,
okay.
instead, just saying, to approve, I say to approve or disapprove.
Okay,
Because it seems like you're,
I agree with that. That's good.
so how would you say,
The second
allowing
one.
the community to override a city
So
planning
instead of override, approve and disapprove.
veto or approval?
No, he's saying to replace override with
on
approve.
the second to last line, we should be able to,
It's gonna be
whatever the
first
veto
line,
is, the
so
veto doesn't
override.
specify if it's a yes or no, but on the second to last line, you seem to be limiting our ability just to approve something as
Oh,
opposed
okay,
to be
the
able to
relevant community
disapprove.
board and 2/3 of the relevant borough board vote to approve
Or disapprove.
or disapprove.
Yeah.
Okay.
With friendly amendment on the introduction part there, on that sentence, instead of saying support increasing the influence, you really should just say support
Just get rid of
increasing the
that.
power.
Mm-hmm.
Because that, you're actually giving an actual change, like an actual
Okay.
tangible thing as opposed to just an advisory thing.
From advisory.
Yeah, we are,
We're blocking up the process.
Yeah, no,
If everybody can, if
I'm
everybody's
down.
at the trough grabbing, we can too.
I mean, I got a lot of pro-affordable housing things I'd like to grab too that ain't nowhere on this document that, again, I've had to leave
Listen.
aside.
You're on the community
So-
board. If when you get to be ULURP
It's okay,
chair and
let's
you
just
get
get
appointed
through
to the
it.
commission, you can grab
Let's
all
get
you
through
want.
it. Let's-
That's what I'm saying.
I don't know if that's what the ULURP
I
chair
don't
is
think, I don't
supposed
think
to
the
do.
chair is supposed to be
But
grabbing.
again, we
You're
gotta
supposed to be
go
moving
over.
the
when
meeting.
you, Joshua, when this gets passed and when you get appointed to the commission and you're
You know
doing
what?
your turn on
I
the
done hit a
commission,
nerve with that
you,
one. Okay.
you are gonna be the one with the power to say, this is for whoever gets on the commission, right? All right,
Let's
so
wrap this up.
Suki,
Benny, all right, Hector, where are you on this? Last,
Go, oh, that last paragraph? I'm not 100% convinced.
I mean,
Are you
the
60%
approval and
convinced?
disapproval didn't change anything. If you voted
Might be
Go
good.
around, Suki, let me
Okay.
just think about
Be
it.
John,
that.
I approve.
before
I'm just
John,
saying you can override
You're in
whatever the
favor,
decision
okay.
is, whether it's
Favor.
a approval decision or
Favor.
disapproval of it.
can I just ask, when you say allow community to override, what
Community
community?
board.
Community board.
well,
Do you-
Community,
do you
you
mean
look-
community
community
board and 2/3 of the relevant borough
Okay, no,
board.
so, but you have to put allow
just making it
community
more linked.
board
Board, yeah.
to
Oh,
override
right,
a
I see.
planning commission.
And-
'Cause what community?
And what part of the community board?
Right,
That means
right,
So
so.
allow,
or
how
not.
about this, we'll just shorten this.
Just the first, no, the
No,
first,
the
the
first
first,
one.
the
No,
first.
allow
no,
The
no,
intro,
no.
the intro, the intro.
Right,
Right.
allow
We were just
community,
thinking
the
that
community
Community
board.
Community board.
Okay, but it's not just the way I wrote it, it wasn't just the community board, it was also the borough board.
Oh,
So
that's
you have to
right.
indicate that,
Doesn't say that.
yeah.
This is
Okay,
a-
so
it says
allow-
that-
It was vague,
So
super vague.
why,
that on the
so
second
why
one.
don't
What's
we
the community like?
say-
You could put, you could
So
put in
why don't we combine-
parentheses,
Okay, so why don't we
community.
combine this sentence?
Because it's a vote to
Allow,
approve. So if you don't vote to approve, you just.
What happened?
I don't know.
So find in here because they want to go home down there too.
They sure do.
Okay, allow the relevant community board and 2/3 of the relevant borough board to override a city planning commission veto, mirroring the mayor's override power. The application then moves to the city council where a 2/3 vote is required for action.
That got changed so fast, I don't know.
Okay. Okay?
Still in
Yes?
favor.
Okay. Cheryl?
And this doesn't preclude us being able to vote for or against, right?
No.
Okay.
Allow the relevant community board and 2/3 of its relevant borough board to override.
Basically, it's mirroring this power that the mayor has, where the CPC
And
just
that's
approves.
what how can we
The application.
mirror
Then
what
moves to the city
mayor-
council where 2/3, okay, I think that's
You're
good.
trying to redirect the power to us, but we're saying it's not realistic to answer your question.
Well,
They're trying.
none of these three things are realistic,
They
but
are.
you know what,
The last
like,
one isn't.
but honestly, like, the mayor is making such a big power grab with this charter revision.
Yeah.
It's worth trying.
Let's
It's a
If he can
negotiation
grab, we can
tactic.
grab.
She just don't wanna take it out, let's move on.
let's
Yeah.
go back.
I
thought y'all was gonna
say-
vote. Y'all
I
still
say-
got two
No,
people
no, we
voting.
did.
Cheryl's
Go for it.
next.
Somebody
Go for it.
made
We
a
already
change that
voted.
wasn't
Yeah.
really relevant.
You wanna redo the vote?
Yeah,
Can we
no,
change the
have-
language?
for that, let's
Okay.
leave it if you.
Can we
Because
please,
She's
we-
just not taking it out.
guys,
Let's
it's
leave it.
9:28,
Yeah, she doesn't wanna take it out.
can we please vote on the entire document,
Yes.
okay?
Is that the top?
Yes, tell me when you wanna move on so that you can all read it.
Where can we see a copy of this after?
At the community board meeting,
No, I need to see before that.
so she could email it to
Email it
that's
tomorrow.
our email
So
list.
when the minutes are sent
Minutes, yeah.
out, that's when we get everything.
Okay.
Okay.
You can't get a copy today? Of it?
We can ask her to print it out, but it
Yeah.
won't be a
It's
clean
gonna take a
copy.
lot.
It's fine,
Anyway.
it's good, yeah,
Y'all just breezing through it.
Yeah, hide the
Went through
edits
it
or
this
something.
whole how many?
And that adds, but at
Y'all
least.
should already
Let me know
what
when you
y'all
want me to
don't
go
like.
on.
Y'all
I think
gonna
you only
say,
you love, girl.
y'all gonna say yes anyway.
Okay, oh, I forgot to change this to 7.5 months, because actually it's, John was right, that there's a period at the end, where modifications can happen.
Should it be years?
It's also, yeah, have 3 to 5 years or
Years,
more
but
development
that's after
timelines.
that.
Have 3 to 5 year or more.
And remove the
timelines. Either way.
space before they,
Wow.
those years. Just backspace one, if you wanna do it before you get there. Before the years, the extra space.
I do like this editing with it on the board. I think it's really good. Very helpful.
Okay. Scroll.
I'm good. I
Let's
read
do this
everything.
Let me add
There are no charter revisions that are calling for that, but yes.
Not yet.
They didn't see this document yet.
It would really be helpful if community boards communicated with each other and shared their realizations.
They used
I
to,
think that would help a whole lot.
they used to, but not under this.
They don't
one.
want any board members to even talk together.
Yeah.
CBA folks wanna talk to us, by the way, in case we're
Okay.
interested, because
Listen,
got-
let's
And y'all share
have a big
districts, so it
old
doesn't make
party at
sense.
the end of
they
the
got
year.
screwed
Not
already.
districts, but y'all share
Let's have a
At the end
picnic.
of the year.
some neighborhoods,
Yeah.
intersect,
Mhm.
majority of people.
Let's have a
Okay.
Go
picnic.
down.
Scroll.
Everybody down?
Everybody done?
So
Okay, keep
we
going,
should
keep
drop
going.
that therefore down to the next page.
Yeah,
And keep it with,
yeah.
It's okay.
It doesn't get broken up. I'll
Yeah,
let
it's
Mia
alright.
do the formatting.
okay, go ahead.
Oppose any changes. The only thing, yeah, it's a little unclear when it says all the bullet points below that are also opposing. I don't know if there's a way to make that a little better, but I think it's fine. Because it's clearly in opposition to all those bullet points, right?
Yeah.
Just,
Okay, so.
We
It says
support
including but
this
not limited
change,
to,
and
so
we
it indicates
oppose
that.
any changes that shorten community board
Right.
review process.
and therefore should we have also, or just?
No, it says
oppose?
included but not limited to, so it's just
Right.
outlining what are the
Some
specific
things, yeah.
points, it already mentions that.
Okay.
The initial statement was that we support anything that is basically empowering the community board and adding engagement. So we approve pre-certification engagement and we oppose anything that's shortening our timeline.
Now we gotta pray that we have full attendance at the board meeting.
If you wanna go to proofread, you put backspace on the last bullet point.
Okay, on that.
I think actually this allocation word is redundant. I think it would be okay to say, and a lack of sufficient city resources, right, for services and capital improvements.
I think allocation is relevant, lack of sufficiency, because you have to distribute them.
Or simply say insufficient allocation. Lack of, it sounds very, it's just like doubly redundant. I'm gonna just,
Yeah,
that's
insufficient.
better.
To our district, given limited private resources, to manage density,
Well,
our.
like, we don't, I mean, like, we, you know, like these big, you know, luxury apartment buildings, they have building staff that they pay tons of money for in their maintenance.
Yeah, I'm
to
just
clean up. They-
reading the language so
You
we,
know,
our
lot of them
median
pay for
household
private
income is
security.
below the median for this city.
Okay, so we're saying that we don't have those,
we don't. I mean, like, you know, these buildings on the Upper East Side and the Upper West Side, their doormen clean up the sidewalks. They have tons of staff to take out the trash. They've, you know, like, there's private security with these wealthy, you know, stores and wealthy neighborhoods. We can't afford all of that. If the city doesn't give us the resources, we're not able to deal with all this stuff.
But then you
so
give them the
we're
resources
saying
to
we
do
need more resources
Yes.
because of the increased density, is that what we're
Because of
trying to-
increase of our higher density and our limited private resources. I mean, for better or worse, the city pretty much expects, like, private owners to pay for stuff
Oh, yeah.
in a lot of places.
The
But they
property
have to,
owners
that's the requirement, they gotta maintain
take
their
care of the
property
trash.
though.
Property owners
Yeah.
shovel the
Required to do
sidewalk
that.
when it snows. I mean, that's what the deal is.
They're required to do that though, that's
And it-
on
But
their
Yeah.
obligation.
like in our district, you know, like with these smaller buildings, especially the ones that are rent stabilized or more affordable, a lot of them only have a part-time super. So
That
the
does-
smaller ones, some of them have no super, and
So
it's
we
the
gotta
tenants
enforce that.
that
Yeah.
are
They're
responsible
just
for
not
taking
being
care
That's
of
what-
taxed
that's
properly. You gotta do
That's what
311.
fines are for.
311.
Sanitation
Just
can
'cause
come
that
out and give you a
private
fine.
super, as long as he's doing his job.
There's actually literally no way to fix that, and I've tried for like 10 years because I
To
have the
fix
same
what?
issue, like to fix a super issue. The law says that they have to live on the premises. They don't have to live on the premises. They
don't.
Mine lives a half an hour from me. So.
And the reality is, like, the way that these, like I said, these luxury buildings make it work is they're paying a ton of money for staff.
Yeah.
You know, they have really high maintenance.
He's gonna be up by 10.
Okay, so we gotta,
That's outside of our purview.
All right, let's hurry along.
Anyway,
Yeah, we've got to get to that interest thing and
alright, so,
so I can abstain.
you didn't bring your sleeping bag?
Right,
Come
for the
on.
last bullet?
A couple of things, but
Josh, you weren't here for the city yes meeting.
Oh.
I came at the tail end. I saw some.
He got to experience that plenty.
Yeah.
At
it's
very
not
end,
fun.
right?
And
Well, I don't know, are they still on
smaller
Zoom?
buildings,
Falling
people wanna
asleep.
clean up where they live. I cleaned my whole 3-unit building while I was facing eviction. I did it every day. I lived there. I think people should clean up where they live.
but there are tons of people that don't know the rules of when they're supposed to put out trash or how they're supposed to put out trash. There's people
I
that
knew
don't.
when my
Yeah,
trash
well,
came. I lived
we
there.
can't, we're not gonna fix that with
I
this.
knew when my trash came with my recycling.
That's not our,
There's times I
it's
waited
not
till
a
3 a.m. in
ULURP
the morning
matter.
to throw
You
my
get tickets, you
own,
learn
my
how
whole
to
building's trash out, and I don't get paid for that.
I did that for a while,
You lived there.
so I could,
Some people are
Keep
really
my
good
rent
about
up.
that, but not everyone
No, but
is.
you get a ticket,
I was
you
just
don't
thinking
have.
like on the side.
Okay, where we going?
next.
A larger building makes sense. Smaller building, no.
And we spent a lot
Wow,
of
this
time on
water
that. So
tastes
hopefully
weird
folks
from
can
this
get through that
faucet.
quickly. Yeah, it's almost 10
We're just
o'clock.
not used to lead. Come
My
on.
cat is waiting for me.
Oh, what color is she?
He's orange.
He's so, oh.
Yeah.
Let's
Next,
finish this
next.
up.
Afterwards, could we, like, we're on
I'm a dog
live
person.
here, that's after.
No cats during the meeting, please.
no cutie pie stuff, let's go.
The bodega cats are getting
Next,
right.
next.
No.
Let's go.
Move along.
District level mandates. And that's okay.
You look so happy.
Wait, what are we doing? Are you guys
Scroll
showing cat pictures
Scroll,
over there?
please. Scroll.
Come on.
Sorry.
Is that it?
Alright, scroll.
All done? This is the most amazing document.
Oh, I can't laugh, it hurts.
I just
I
have
just
money to
shred it.
put spaces because it's
No, I think it's good.
Oh, CB9, they really did it good this time. Boom.
So, but everybody had a copy of this before. Why didn't y'all make y'all amendments?
These are the changes.
No, they made so many changes
Multiple
just today.
Oh, yeah, it's
So I like how you.
This has been being
And you
amended.
voted
With
on it.
But
40
everybody
And
inputted
it's still changed.
what they wanted to change before
You
the
did that
meeting?
one, right? That-
No,
right there.
I didn't.
Well, then
Listen,
you
if
shouldn't be
you ever
spending
get
too long.
selected to the city
things come
council,
up.
you will be
Never.
such good
Things come up as you
legislators.
just-
You
Wish
have
Hector
long
good luck.
practice doing this.
Yeah,
Good luck.
Y'all shouldn't complain about staying late then.
You can scroll.
That's it.
That-
right?
no,
Oh.
one more.
I would have said
Wow.
set a timer for the
Oh.
last 10 minutes. You print, and but it's gonna be the same problem. This person don't agree with this. Just want to change things.
Can you imagine 51 people having to go through documents that are hundreds of thousands of pages long?
Sorry.
This is nothing.
That's why there
That's
should,
why
there
it's
should be a
so
limit.
effed up
How
anyway,
big
because
they
they
can
don't
be.
go through all
I
that.
was gonna say, do they
Yeah.
read them?
Let's put in here that city,
Things come up for them
community
too.
board members should have legislative staff.
That's why, you know,
Yeah, staff.
yeah, we
With
have,
this
we have
issue
Nancy
here.
Well, we
Pelosi
did
saying,
say
find out what's in it
resources
after
for
we pass
communities
it.
to do
Well,
comprehensive.
Marjorie Taylor Greene said like,
So that could've
I didn't know that was in there, I voted for it, but I didn't know it was there, so I'm sorry.
Like,
It's like, well,
they
yeah,
have
yeah.
planning, like,
They have staff too, and they have computers, that can do searches, and-
Yeah, I know, but still.
but they don't bother.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. She's too busy with other things.
Alright,
Okay,
let's do a vote.
let's do, all in favor?
I,
I,
Alright, raise your hand if you're in favor. Are you gonna call for it?
You need a roll call?
I
And second
move that we approve this statement on, the Charter Revision Commission.
is the chair,
As
is the chair,
revised.
is the chair?
Sure, he's the chair.
Okay.
Second,
Second, I second.
okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Even though I'm not in favor, I will vote because we work hard.
Thank you, John. Your cat is
Any
so
opposed?
appreciated.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
It's just a,
Nope.
it's just a comment.
Can I,
Not legislation,
can I,
not funding.
can I please direct your attention
Good night.
to this?
I move,
We voted on this already, that the zoning.
Did you
Hold on.
adjourn?
Not yet.
changes,
Not yet.
But I wanna make sure that you all see the final document,
Yeah.
which was out in Word. This is the one that says Community District 9 zoning principles. We added a bunch of
This
stuff,
one?
yeah.
it's here, it's in the
We
email.
got it, right?
Okay,
Okay.
and there was one change that was made
red?
in red,
Yeah.
where we said with the exception of minimal enlargements that would be permitted by the Board of Standards and Appeals variance, instead of with the exception of enlargements for the single-family homes.
Do we need to vote on that?
We voted on it already, I think,
This is the one that
Yes.
Josh
But-
gave the
Yes.
agenda,
Yeah.
right? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
All right.
but can we just, we can vote on
Revote.
it again if you guys want.
No, we voted.
That's fine,
Yeah,
that's a minimal
But I
change.
just wanted to be sure that everybody saw the
Yes,
final
Yes.
thing.
as well you should, Ms.
Noted.
White.
Okay?
Thank you.
Yeah.
I move that we adjourn.
I second.
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 All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Everybody
you.
get home safe.
Have a good